Starting, and we're live. So how can I find the comments that are going to start coming in? Because I do want to tell people, hey.
Oh, I mean, because we're live right now, let's actually do the YouTube BTS. You actually have to go to your video that's live streaming, and then it's super distracting because you're going to start hearing like a 10-second delay of the show.
Right.
And then you have to pause that video. And what I do is I pull the live chat, I pop the live chat out. So that's
that's what I typically do
again, it's ridiculous. You'd think in giving producers and creators tools to produce better quality content, more advertiser friendly content, they just give us a feed that didn't require us to stream the show that we're currently producing to get to the comments from like Raul. Raul wants free stuff, man. He's like all into it. And Jason, he's saying that like I don't suck, so that's cool. And Edon, he's loving JTL. I mean, this is some good stuff you wouldn't want to miss, but YouTube makes you have like 6 windows open.
Yeah.
To actually participate with your own audience.
Yeah, it's
like in a bad way. Like in a bad way.
it's a huge pain in the ass. Sure. And it's like I feel like I know how to use the technology, but then YouTube always dissuades me of that.
So, I mean, again, if we want to do the inside scoop for your audience, I'll air our dirty laundry here.
Oh, sure.
This stream would have been ready to go a half hour ago if YouTube's audio mechanics weren't tremendously broken for people who are trying to use Hangouts with nicer audio equipment.
Yeah.
This is almost like the same problem we had on the Pocket Now podcast, the same problem I had on my own personal channel. And like I'm running audio off of, it's a nice portable recorder, but I can't use my fucking baller Focusrite 6i6, just like you can't use your, what are you using? You're using a UA?
Yeah, I've got a UAD Apollo Twin Mark II. Yeah, it's like a $900 interface, and it won't work with YouTube.
No, like, and YouTube really hasn't. I mean, like, because this is a problem I've been running into for probably 2 years now, and off and on trying to find some kind of good audio solution that I can record high quality audio on my own and use that same hardware to live stream. Don't have problems with Skype. Don't have problems with FaceTime. Don't have problems with Twitch. The second I plug it into Hangouts, I either go robot voice or I'm like so ridiculously out of sync. I'm probably going to be a little bit out of sync just because Hangouts is still a pain. But I'll be so ridiculously out of sync that it's not even worth watching or streaming. So it's been a major thorn in my side for about 2 years now.
Eric R., you get a shout out. I sound like Oprah now.
Yes, I mean, we were doing the romper room thing. Yeah, I mean, gotta, like, and I see Eric, and I see Raul, and I see Jason.
Exactly. So, folks in the chat, I'll remind folks as we come in, we're going to be watching the chat, but we're going to do sort of the podcast between the two of us, covering the stuff that we're planning on covering, and then at the end of that, we're going to go back through and do some Q&A. So hang out till the end, and we can cover questions and that kind of thing, maybe inspired by some of the things that we talk about here on the podcast. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and give like the standard podcast intro, and then we will take it from there. So, hey there, friends. My name's Jason, sometimes known as the JTL. This is Painfully Honest Tech, the podcast. And today we are going to talk about a bunch of things, including some ridiculous Apple products. And we're going to do it with my friend Juan Carlos Bagnell, who has very graciously agreed to join us to discuss these things. Juan, welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. I'm actually tweeting out your show right now so that everyone who wants to watch knows that we're on right now. And if you just want to vamp for a little bit, I'll handle some of the social media. And
sure, yeah. No, I can do all that. I
multitask the heck out of this show. It's great.
I just got a comment earlier today. I just looked at it as we were trying to get this thing figured out. Some dude on one of my iPhone videos said, dude, you talk more than my wife. Shut up.
I feel like that's someone who does not appreciate or respect the relationship he has with his wife.
Yeah, but he's also
I'm just saying, like, you know, that to me would actually be a compliment. Like, hey, I'm having an in-depth conversation with you, and it's resembling the conversations that I might have with the person I respect most on this planet.
Yeah, I think that might have been sort of a point of insecurity for him.
It sounds like it. And I would wholly appreciate that wife kicking that dude's ass.
Yeah. Like, right after he asks her to bring him another pot pie.
Just carboning off on the side, like grown man child. I mean, like, I'm not the biggest fan of Jordan Peterson. Not to stray this into like Joe Rogan life philosophy territory, but that's the one thing that I think he absolutely nails with like young men learning how to be mature, functional members of society, is not like succumbing to this man boy child whim that it's really easy to fall into.
Yeah, it's difficult to really make the decision at some point. Like, I think when you're in a relationship with somebody, it's easy for guys to say like, "Oh, you're now like a mother figure for me."
Right.
And it's really difficult when then you have kids and the guy is always like, but it was me. And and now you're like paying more attention to this other thing.
Yeah, I gotta say, I mean, like the one thing again, not, you know, we'll talk about some tech. I promise we'll talk about some tech.
We're getting there.
My wife is one of the most inspiring individuals I think I've ever met. The pregnancy to bring our daughter into the world was not an easy one, and it was only through an amazing display of fortitude that she came through the pregnancy okay, and that our daughter came through the pregnancy okay. That is literally the person I respect most on this planet. You know, like, I'm not going to sit there and belittle like, oh, women, you know, like, come on, exactly. That's ridiculous. If I didn't enjoy spending time with this person, I would leave. I can make my own hot pockets. I'm cool.
I know. It always sucks though when the stuff comes out the end, you know, and it's like burns your mouth.
It does, you know, and I guess like that's a terrible turn of events when I screw up and I burn the roof of my mouth on hot food.
Yeah. Yeah, and then
I think I'll just get on with that.
Yeah. Well, you know, my wife too. We've been together for 20. I think this
right on, dude.
26 years we've been together.
That is a phenomenal accomplishment. I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah, we met in college and moved to New York together, and then back. You know, we had our daughter back to West Virginia, all that kind of stuff. So when we decided we were going to have a kid, we were both in our 30s, and we had kind of planned not to do it for a while, and then we weren't trying not to do it, and it wasn't happening. So we ended up going the in vitro route.
Oh wow!
And that is some crazy science fiction stuff.
Yeah, it is.
But what the woman has to go through, what my wife had to go through in order to make the in vitro thing work, you know, like basically 6 shots a day in different parts of her body, like intramuscular injections for 30 days, twice a day. I don't know. She couldn't sit right, literally, for 3 years after that, because she had just tenderized her muscles. And
I mean, like, the only way, because, you know, some of our experiences weren't necessarily that visceral to start with, but my wife had some medical issues that made this all child creation very difficult.
Right.
And like, you sit back and you like, if we weren't a team on this, I just have to imagine, like, what if I had been some weak dude, right? You know, like, there's no way that she would have been able to make it through this, you know, if she hadn't had some support. And that means, you know, like, something as stupid as like, you know, you're doubled over in pain, I'll do the laundry. I'm a capable, functional adult in the 21st century. I can tap my phone on my LG washing machine to at least start a rinse cycle so that you don't have to get up. This is these gender normative roles. Ooh, so scary.
Yeah, no, I know.
It's detergent work. Oh no.
Now we have Tide Pods. So as long as you don't eat them.
In the office and we're telling people that they shouldn't eat detergent. That's all it took for us to succumb into idiocracy. I love it.
Yeah, it's
I love it.
Is it because they look like Jell-O?
I don't know. It's just a continuation of, again, people behaving poorly for outrageous internet points. And like, I almost want to say all the people that were out there putting out disclaimers like, don't eat Tide Pods. You're like, no, don't. In fact, let's remove warning labels, because if you can't figure out that Ben Gay is for external use only, maybe you shouldn't be a part of the gene pool. Maybe this will thin out some of our ranks.
Yeah, I mean, at least when I was a kid, I went to camp. You sometimes learned about the Ben Gay icy hot thing, in a really sort of unfortunate way.
Totally. Oh, hey, we got Dom Esposito in the chat. Eat all the Tide Pods. That's what I'm saying, son.
I know.
Like, if someone wants to go out there and create a ridiculous challenge like that, I don't feel it's necessarily society's responsibility to always stop them. This is what I'm saying.
Yeah. We have created a society where we basically have to, like, we're wearing sort of psychic football pads all the time.
Right.
So anyway, maybe we should start talking about the things we came here to talk about. So one of the first things I wanted to talk about with you, man, is the fact that it's funny for me. Like, I've been watching your videos for probably like 4 or 5 years, I think.
Oh, right on, man.
Thanks. And I remember, did you make a Nissan Leaf video years back?
One of my buddies got like one of the very first generation Nissan Leafs.
Yes.
And it took me for a drive around it. We grabbed lunch. And in Hollywood, you have like a 2-hour lunch, so it wasn't an appropriate amount of time to recharge the car. That was a fun video to put together.
Yeah. I think that was one of the first ones of yours that I watched. And I had just bought a Chevy Volt, and I was like, I got to watch all the videos about electric cars, which is part of the purchasing process of anything now that YouTube exists. But yeah, I mean, and then I've really always admired the real audio videos you do for Pocket Now, and also the camera stuff. I mean, I think that stuff, nobody really goes into depth about audio in the way that I think is appropriate, but you really sort of bring it and cover stuff in a way that I think people could walk away with some education. So I've always been a big admirer.
Well, and it's one of the reasons why I've always enjoyed your videos too, is I feel that there's a way that when you have some kind of expertise in a certain subject, we can share the opinion side just as everyone else can. I plugged in headphones. It sounded good. My opinion is it's better than this or better than that. But oftentimes when there is the opportunity to back that up with some kind of other data, right, then that can help inform, And so there's a lot of there's a lot of opinion surrounding something like audio, and you come out of some background in recording too, where someone's personal position on like the tone or clarity or warmth of a specific piece of audio equipment can sometimes supersede just some raw data. Noise floor or total output or gain or what gain stage you're using or what preamp that you've got, something like that. And so if we can at least just deliver that opinion with some of the data to back it up, then I feel you're arming your viewer with a little bit more information to go out there and make an informed purchasing decision. Yeah,
because it's like there is the subjective, like, I like the way these sound, but then there are objective measures that you can really know something about what you're hearing to be a more educated listener.
Well, and I find that when it comes to something like tech and lifestyle, like because I mean everything we're going to talk about, especially an Apple focused show, like a lot of the topics that you want to discuss tonight. Yep. As soon as the subjectivity of the reviewer starts landing in one of the two major camps, Apple or Samsung, then you stop really reviewing other products and you just review them against the side that's already won for you.
Right.
And so so many reviews that you'll watch, and it's like, this wasn't really a review. It was a comparison against the phone that they've already chosen to be the winner.
Yeah.
And, and so that'll bleed into, well, this is the phone that I like, so this is the phone that has the better camera. When that's backwards. You should be trying to say, like, what camera took the better photos, or what camera performed better under these conditions, and then see what camera was attached to that device. And that's one of the things that I think is always difficult to untangle is, like looking over my own channel metrics. I'm sure looking at what videos are scoring really big for you, it's all too easy to sit there and say, like, if I just make a video with iPhone X in the title every day, I'd be scoring pretty big on this YouTube game, but that would be a really boring and hideous life to live if all I was doing was gaming YouTube metrics.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like the iPhone 10 stuff took off for me, and that's what really sort of started a snowball effect. And yeah, I've made a lot of iPhone 10 related videos, but I'm always trying to make them in such a way, like, the subjectivity and predisposition.
You haven't given up on other videos,
right?
I watch your stuff. It's not like you went and exclusively became an iPhone vlogger or something like that. It's the tricky thing of like trying to find what is it the conversation that I really want to have, and finding if someone's going to resonate with that conversation, but still not giving up on like what's interesting to me. And so even doing something silly, like I revisited the Lumia 1020, it's like a 4-year-old Windows phone, but it's got a baller camera on it. You put that video together and you're like, I know I'm going to find some people out there that have nostalgic warm fuzzies for that phone. But that's not going to define my channel. Like I scored pretty good on that video. I'm not going to sit here and then like, well, let me do 20 other videos on the Lumia 1020 because that would be dull as shit. I want to get on with my life and look forward to some new stuff coming out too.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. I mean, the thing about this for me is I want to have conversations about tech, but then I also like want to have conversations about how tech works with people's lives. So you can have the very basic, like, here's the thing, and I'll review it for you and give you the pluses, minuses, all that. But then when the video I made about the 2 months after the iPhone 10, I went back to the 6S Plus.
Yeah.
That was really a video that was more about like, what is the actual value of the iPhone 10?
Up on my iPhone SE, I still think this is probably the best considered all-rounder, best pieced together, best machined piece of tech that Apple has put out. No, I keep coming back to this mighty mouse of a little phone, and it is such a rock star. Yeah. And it's the last era of the hardware and software, I feel, really complementing each other to the best possible degree.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And there's something about the way that they put that design together so that it was reminiscent of some of the elements that they were drawing from to make this thing that was an amalgamation of lots of different tech. Like the Leica camera inspiration for the frame and that kind of thing. I think when you look at the SE and the 5S before it, and then you look at the iPhone 6 and everything that's come after it, I mean, I think the iPhone 10 is objectively a pretty beautiful piece of hardware.
You notice like the pause and the stutter that you just had?
Well, because I'm waiting for somebody to hate me. But
I mean, that's cool. I mean, you like unibrows. That's fine. You just got to get your grooming under control.
Okay. Yeah.
Not gonna hate on someone's eyebrow stitching. It's all right.
But I will say that when looking at this older design versus what we've had for the past 3 or 4 years, those iPhone 6, 6S, 7, some pretty boring ass design that was really not pushing anybody's envelope.
No, I think Apple fell in the trap because this was the era of Apple where they were playing catch up fierce. Yeah. And so many of their assertions had proved untrue. This is the era of Apple where they started putting some real muscle behind the iPad mini. Remember, mini tablets were a terrible fad that no one wanted. Oh, wait, people were buying a whole bunch of low power Samsung mini tablets. Oh, well, we'll make an iPad mini. Yeah. It was Apple reacting to the market, and Apple has always traditionally been at their weakest when they're making knee-jerk reactions to fulfill market demographics in a way that Steve Jobs would have laughed at. You know?
Yeah, well, Steve Jobs was guilty of it as well, though. I mean, you know, he famously was like, when the original Note came out, he famously was like, "That's a ridiculous thing. Like, this is the perfect phone, and we'll never make a phone with a giant screen like that." And then,
right, but look at how long it took Apple to change gears on that. And at what era did Apple actually change gears from the perfect one thumb form factor device to making larger screens? It's Apple right around the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus that is now responding to the market as opposed to trying to drive what they think the Apple ecosystem should look like. And that brings us to today, where you can go to apple.com and buy one of 8 different iPhones at a variety of different price tiers that all overlap significantly and all offer very similar experiences. And you can just choose how much prestige you want to have. So do you want to show off your functional Target purse, or do you want to show off that you spent way more on a Louis Vuitton? And you can do that. So anyone who's looking at the label can know exactly how much money you spent over the last season for the right label to hold up to your ear. Right. And that, to me, is not a good look for a tech company that we should be celebrating as cresting over into being a lifestyle brand.
Yeah, that's
I'm really excited about a tech company winning. Like, they're winning. People define parts of their fashion and their style through this Apple logo. That's a success for all of us geeks.
Right.
What if they then just fall into this trap of like, well, we're going to make it because it has the logo on it, and we're not really going to drive, and we're not really going to push, and we're not really going to come up with the new way. We're not going to be the leader in that. Then I feel it's a wasted opportunity.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the fact that there are that many iPhones available, and the real difference between them, like the difference between a 6S and or an SE and the newer models, is so imperceptible, you know, like in daily use. But people get caught up in the cycle, and that's the lifestyle brand thing. Like, I got to get the new sneakers.
Well, this year it comes in pink.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, from iPhone 6 to iPhone 8. Yeah. A major part of it is like, oh, well, now it's a matte black. Now you know that this one's different than the one before it, because you got the matte black one, and that's where you're stuck. Whereas I'm always like so proud to see there's an audio engineer that works on the Newegg show. There's a cameraman and an audio engineer that are rocking a 5 and a 5S, and you're like, they're still going strong. The phones still do everything we need them to do. They're not playing like crazy games on their phone, or like they have headphone jacks because they're audio guys. Yeah. Like, they don't have to worry about plugging in a dongle. Like saying, like, if your phone dies over the next couple of weeks, like it's a little long in the tooth too, but the SE is the baller choice, because then all your cases are still going to fit too. Yeah. Like the case that I have on mine is an iPhone 5 case on my iPhone SE, and it's gorgeous. And I love rubbing it against my face. And all
right, that's a little weird. I'm going to be honest.
I mean, like, I'm going to try and keep it painfully honest for you, man. I have strong feelings about this.
No, I totally agree. I harp on the headphone jack thing so often, and people get really ticked off at me and tell me to just get over it. But I'm actually working on a video that I'm gonna come out with that, just from my own ears, I went back and forth between a headphone jack and dongle, and there are actually some people who did metrics and tested the dongle versus the headphone jack, and shows that there is a difference. I could actually hear the difference. And so,
if you know what you're listening for, because I can scientifically demonstrate too, there is a different DAC in the dongle.
Yeah.
And so this is not comparative. And from every metric that I can measure, from the iPhone 6 and 6S, which also is the same thing that you'll find in the iPhone SE, to then going to the iPhone 7, everything gets a little bit worse. And not only that, is I would imagine for a $10 accessory, and Apple is not known for being really cool and groovy with giving us low margin products. Like, even on a $10 dongle, we know Apple is making their nut.
Yeah.
I would also question whether or not you would get the same QA that you would get the same consistency of experience. Like if you rounded up 15 iPhone dongles, would they all be within a very tight margin of error? And
Right.
I would have a hard time imagining that to be true. I don't have any data to say it's false, but I would have a hard time imagining that it's true. And that these things are going to break down faster over time, that they're going to get lost easily. That it's everything that's cynical about Apple buying Beats, putting a ton of money and effort and energy behind Bluetooth audio, and then suddenly getting rid of the headphone jack within a year. Well, that's interesting. That's a really fast way to make back an investment on $1 billion merger and acquisition.
It was $3 billion.
I mean, I just say an acquisition that was in the billions.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like, I feel like the real opportunity that losing the headphone jack, but going with a dongle, to me was, hey, that's an opportunity for people to design something that's really cool and is going to actually make sound better. Yeah, potentially, because you can have external DACs and you can do all this different stuff, but that market hasn't taken off. The wireless headphone market is what has really gained steam.
Yeah.
And
we see a lot of companies jumping through hoops to try and address. I mean, like Bowers and Wilkins, a brand that is like so old school. You know, they made noise in 2017 about coming out with their first not only Bluetooth but active noise cancellation headphones. Like a company sort of built its rep on audio purity. Involving themselves with noise cancellation just seems like such an odd place for them to be playing in, but they're responding to a market which is being driven by people more and more often acquiring devices that you can't plug traditional cables into. Because I'm with you too. I feel like there's a consumer argument to be made that USB-C should take over. But I also don't feel that Apple's way of removing the jack really reflected the market. You know, because you could have put out some lightning connector solutions while you still had a 3.5 millimeter jack and say, you know, this is a transition that we see happening. These products we believe are superior. You can make them more expensive because you have to license the lightning connector. Apple makes more money on these products. And then you can prep your audience for like a 1-year transition phone on an iPhone 7 before you then go to the iPhone 10 and rip the jack out. Instead, just pulling it the way they did and trying to justify it, trying to call it courage. We all know that that's a joke.
Yeah. There was nothing courageous about taking the jack away. It was really, you know, Apple has this weird thing about being really cynical with what they're doing and telling you that it's from the best place of their heart. And it's like, no, like,
I mean, to be fair, a lot of companies do. Like, you can go to Samsung the same way, like with their Galaxy Note 8 announcement, just all the fan service and all the people who stuck by us, and you didn't let the Note name die, and we're only here because of you. And you're like, no, you're here to make a shit ton of money. We can all acknowledge that. I mean, you're making great products. That's not the problem. It's this like trying to get people caught up in the emotion of what this stuff should be. And again, I don't always believe that consumers end up always finding the right fit for them, but they're emotionally satisfied with their $1,000 purchase now. And it's one of the things, is an old school techie, like going all the way back to like, you know, original Palm Pilots and stuff, that I miss having some of those fights about like actually trying to achieve the bang for buck. And we're seeing it also gamed with other companies too. Like I don't think OnePlus really earns the rep that they've built with various Android fan bases and fan communities. This bang for buck argument that they're making, but it's marketing, and it's savvy marketing, and it's emotionally satisfying. So, you know, this is a demographic of people who've been kind of ignored by the Samsung Apple dichotomy, and so OnePlus is absolutely capitalizing in a genius way on that kind of, you know, feeling of being left out, that techies and geeks built this community, and now we're still not allowed to sit at the cool kids lunch table. Well, here comes ZTE, you know, like they're all playing the same game, just with different marketing hooks.
Well, and the interesting thing, I mean, you know, it's sort of transitioning to one of the topics we're going to talk about. Like Apple finally
list.
Yeah. Apple finally released they're going to pre-sell the HomePod here in
I know you're super excited about this.
Yeah.
This is like your favorite.
I am disgusted by this. And the thing about it is, it's a product that's 10 years late, that doesn't have the killer apps that the competitors have had. Like Sonos has been the game. This is Sonos's game. And Apple's coming out with something that's more expensive, that doesn't do
less functionality.
Yeah, and is probably going to be so Apple centric that it'll be crippled. Not to mention,
but that's also been Apple's MO for a while now. When it works well, I respect a company that can polish the edges on rough technologies and make them more consumer palatable. Right? Apple at their best introduces general consumers into very advanced technological environments through leveraging their ecosystem.
Right.
It's just that we've never seen the Apple ecosystem as divisive and as rough as it is in 2018.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel like they're coasting right now on the reputation they earned from 5-10 years ago, even back to the original E and iMacs. Like, oh, it's so easy. And you plug in this one cable and you plug in this mouse and keyboard and you're on the internet. And I'm Jeff Goldblum in an Apple commercial. Like you take it back to that era of Apple. And I feel that was an Apple that was innovative, not necessarily pushing the boundaries on tech power, but introducing tech to consumers in a way that it was so much more accessible than what us PC gearheads were doing, like soldering shit together on our motherboards to build our own workstations. So what I see today, and I agree with you, because I feel HomePods is like a direct evolution of that, is now it's becoming reductive. Now we have an ecosystem which is stunting the user's ability to do things, but they also don't know what the potential might be for a competing product because they're so tied into this ecosystem. And trying to break someone out of that, it becomes an almost dogmatic conversation, and one where I kind of want to walk away most times. Like, I don't want to be the dick telling you that you spent way too much money on something that you like, that you could have gotten something better, but you don't seem to need or want anything better. So I'm going to shake your hand and say, hey, cool, I'm so glad that you like this thing that you bought, and I'm glad that you're enjoying it. And I'll just kind of grumble to myself and just kind of push that acid in my stomach a little bit deeper and a little bit lower, and go home and enjoy something that I like, that I spent way less on and can do way more. But we see Google playing the same game too. I mean, look at the Google Home Mini. What an amazing opportunity that would have been to just put in an audio out on this $50 speaker, so that you could build it directly into a nice home theater or home system and integrate your Google. Oh, no. If you want to have nice speakers, we've got the Google Home Max. And bullshit, I'm going to buy 2 of those and wreck my living room just so I can talk to Google through some useless interaction with an assistant that's not really going to help me out that much. What sucks is we're seeing this trend. Once you're at that top player, a Samsung, a Google, an Apple, they're all racing to the middle in the most lowest common denominator way possible. And I feel like we could do better. And that's where you're absolutely, I mean, like, I'm looking at companies like Sonos, like, that's some badass work. And I really want to try and celebrate that kind of work, because I feel that's a much better benefit to consumers. And
I think that the thing that really annoys me about Apple and the HomePod thing is that they're not, this is the difference of like the Apple of today versus the Apple of, Steve Jobs, is that Steve Jobs had a passion for stuff like audio, and it reflected in the products that were being made. Like, he wanted to create an easier, but also very good audio experience with the iPod. Right.
Oh yeah.
And it took a few years to really get that to the place where it was something that was functional, and the ecosystem was there for it to really, maybe I think it destroyed the music industry, but that's another
Oh,
conversation.
no. I don't think iPod destroyed music industry. I think the music industry destroyed the music industry when they didn't react to Napster in a meaningful way. So I mean, not to like relitigate Napster.
No, I mean,
I mean the iPhone just accelerated a trend towards a music store that was out of the control of the music industry, and so. Right. You know, I don't think that they were the catalyst. I just think that they were one of the things that made the reaction more volatile.
Yeah.
And then when everyone else raced into the market and we started getting Pandoras and Spotify's, that's really what fucked artists after that point. And yeah, Apple was late to that game too.
Yeah, I know. Well, the thing about Apple, Apple Music, of course, is an obvious sort of, they bought my favorite music streaming service after Beats had bought it.
Right.
It was this service called Mog. I don't know if anybody remembers it, but I liked it because it was more album centric in some way.
Yeah.
Than other streaming services are playlist and individual songs based, and that's just not the way I grew up listening to music.
That's how I soundtrack. I'm going to be working out. I'm not really paying attention to music. I like that, but when I want to sit down and listen to music, and that's what I want to focus on, then I need something that's a bit more coherent, or at least a little more cohesive.
Yeah, and that's the most frustrating thing for me about music totally going over into the digital world, is it becomes like a consumer product to be consumed in a disposable way in a lot of and it very readily becomes the soundtrack of people's lives. And
well, I mean, again, it's like, if you would ask little Juan when he was like 8 years old with his first Walkman cassette tape deck, what he would think about a future where I could literally listen to weeks of audio, never hear the same song twice, and never take earbuds out of my ears, and always be able to like charge cycle different devices. I would have said that was crazy. I would have said that that's impossible. But what we have arrived at is disposable content, which just sort of flits in the background of what other activity you're actually paying attention to. And I think that's why we've been seeing this revival of vinyl. Yeah, it's a tactile experience that forces you to sit down and pay attention and focus on this one aspect of entertainment or media right in front of you. We saw some really interesting stuff. Like Audio-Technica had new decks out at CES this year.
Oh yeah.
They look clean, new design, like kind of a digital aspect to an analog medium. And that's why I think we're seeing some of these things kind of cycle. And, getting back to the HomePod, I don't know. Do you think that maybe the one value you could point to is that someone is paying that Apple tax to interact with networking audio in a way that's way less intimidating than if they were going with some kind of third-party product, especially with just how varied, like no company's won yet for Internet of Things and smart home.
Right.
And that's actually a good thing. I think we have a lot of problems to solve before one company just gets to have a monopoly on that shit.
Yeah.
But do you think that that's enough for something like HomePod? It's really easy if you're in an Apple household to incorporate this into your Apple household.
Yeah, I think that, again, like it is probably the ease of use that would be the best argument for getting one. But for me, like if it's not first and foremost something that's going to improve my listening experience, then I'm not really interested in it.
Right.
And that's me. I come from like a long way back with just two speakers and an amplifier. I sit there, I put on headphones, whatever. And I've had Sonos stuff in the house before, And the real huge benefit of the Sonos stuff was being able to listen to music throughout the house very easily. And the HomePod offers that possibility, but here's the thing that is really frustrating. That's not coming until sometime later this year. It's like you're 10 years late on a product, Apple, and you can't even come up to the same level as the people you're trying to compete with.
Right. I think one of the things, one of the things that I think is difficult for us to untangle is listening to you, something that's going to be a benefit to your listening style. You're talking about amps and monitors and very high quality signal throughput. And I think a lot of consumers who are looking at a smart speaker space, the Amazon Echoes and Google Homes and stuff like that, I think there probably is some trust that if we put a HomePod up against an Echo, the HomePod is probably going to sound better.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that it will. But again, that's sort of lost on the target market.
You think so? I think the target market would look at that as like, well, I wanted a smart speaker and it sounds better than that Amazon garbage. And, that's worth $350 to me.
Yeah.
Like I feel that for Apple's demo, Apple's target market, I kind of think this is perfect. I'm just hoping to convince some of my family and friends to not just jump directly into this if there are other products that can compete. But again, I would be very curious to see, like, if I set up in my office with acoustic blankets on the wall and stuff like that, just to kind of help with some reflection and give me a little bit better podcasting capabilities, that if I set up a HomePod and I set up a Sonos, how many people would pick the HomePod just because it was the HomePod?
Well, yeah, the way to really do that is to
gotta go double blind.
The blind taste test, yes. But and that's the thing for me, is that I was really impressed with. So Sonos can be a simple speaker that sits on your bookshelf and pumps out some music as you go about your house cleaning or whatever. But you can also get two Play Ones and then link them in stereo and have a pretty darn good sounding stereo system. And to me, that's like the huge value of Sonos, is that they're an audio company. They're thinking about the audio experience and then thinking about the various consumers that they can attract.
I also just question, like, at some point, okay, so we've gone through these different phases of expanding technology into other areas. And I kind of look at the Bluetooth headset as being one of the vanguard products. The Bluetooth earpiece became synonymous with being an utter douchebag, but it was a connection to your phone, kept you hands-free. It was wireless. That was like a first step. And then we get into things like smartwatches, peeling services off of just a phone or just a computer and spreading them around. And I wonder, how long is it going to be fashionable to have an assistant built into the speaker, as opposed to some sort of ubiquitous fog of computing power, a home server, or maybe the brain is in your phone, but it interacts with you with whatever screen or speaker you're standing by. Right. To me, it feels like smartwatches. Smartwatches have peaked, right? Like, Google certainly doesn't seem interested in Android Wear anymore, so I don't understand why consumers would be. So, once you've reached that sort of critical mass you've pushed this idea as far as it can go, I feel like smart speakers as a product segment are going to be even more short-lived than most of these other things that we've seen with trying to make other devices smarter or more incorporated into our daily lifestyle or personal area networks. And so I look at something like Sonos, and like, I think that's cool. Alexa built into a Sonos wireless speaker, and you can get a couple of them, link them up, and build your own, stereo or surround environment that follows you throughout your home. What I'd rather just have is a legit home network, maybe off of a mesh network. Just build Alexa into my router.
Yeah.
And then I don't even have to worry about what's being, and that's where I think like Google missed an opportunity with the Google Home. Like, don't make me rebuy speakers. I have good speakers.
Right.
Find me a way to plug this into one Ethernet jack that then can plug into the exact same networking equipment that my wireless cameras are on, that my thermostat's on, and you've just won me over. Right. But making me put one speaker in one place in my house that I can only interact with when I'm in that room feels, again, it feels, and I mean this in the most traditional sense of the word, as in to halt progress, it feels retarded.
Yeah.
It really does.
Well, and it's partially the product strategy, though, is that they want to tier their, so they make the HomePod Mini or the Google Home Mini $30 at Christmas time, and,
right?
You know, and everybody buys 5, and then you've got,
even though they're broken.
Yeah. And to me, like, I think that ultimately, you made a good point about the Internet of Things. Like, the home network is what ultimately will control all of these things, and you'll have speakers that are connected to, let's say, I mean, you can already see the parts of it, like Plex servers and you know, like you can see once somebody comes up with, here's a thing that will take all of your music and pipe it everywhere in your house, and it'll also run your security system, and it'll run your TV, and it'll run your blah blah blah. So that's where ultimately we're going, and our phones are just going to be the interface that
and
we
only
carry
one
with.
interface.
Right.
That to me is what has the most potential. Like, I don't necessarily want a smart TV because then my TV is dated faster.
Right.
My TV ages faster when the computer in it is less powerful after a year for new apps and services. But you give me a new Chromecast every other year, and I'm actually feeling much more positive about that, because then the screen's just the screen. And it's the same thing too. Like, I at CES checking out some of the new like AI mesh work that ASUS is doing, where you don't even necessarily need to buy a specific mesh home routing system. They've now got a toggle on their older routers. So if you have like an ASUS high quality router, you can turn it into a mesh node.
Right.
And you can just kind of build out your network that way. And you're like, damn. I mean, so if I've got like a really nice router and I've got an older router and I can mesh those, attach that to my network attached storage solution, which is also running a Plex server because it's a computer with a ton of hard drives in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can just put a couple little Wi-Fi sticks into things like my home stereo and my TVs. There's literally no reason why I shouldn't have ubiquitous voice control actions, voice interactions throughout my entire house, and literally not add another speaker or microphone to the setup. I'm already done. Like, they're already there, and they're not linked or they're not communicating in the dumbest way possible.
Yeah. And I think ultimately we're in that sort of middle period where companies are going to make these purpose-made devices like the HomePod, like the Google Home Minis and the Google Home Max and all that. They're going to make these products that actually don't solve a problem. They're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist.
Or they're a solution in search of a problem.
Yeah.
You know, it's like when tablets were a big thing, and you're like, well, what do you do with it? And you're like, I can't tell you what you're going to do with it, but I have found things that I like to do on a tablet better than I like to do on a phone. And I feel like, to kind of go along with that, because I agree with your point there, one of the things that I think I might be missing is someone who likes to get in the nuts and bolts of my home network, for example.
Right.
Google Home and Google Home Mini are cute, soft around the edges ways to take the fear out of the consumer base.
Right.
I mean, look at like how many people reacted viscerally to the Xbox with Kinect. Like, even my wife was like, I don't want my game console. We got a PlayStation just because she was so against, an always on listening device in our living room that was reporting what we said back to Microsoft. Blah, 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 blah. And so now you've got the exact same idea. packaged in a cutesy little box with a helpful little voice that can tell you jokes, and you can play your Seinfeld trivia game with your Amazon skill, and it's so much more adorable with a little ring that lights up with colors.
Yeah.
And now it's taking all the sting off of it. I mean, like, that's also where I want to drive this stuff way farther, way faster than I think consumers are ready for, because I want that ubiquitous Star Trek fog of computer interaction in my house. But it's like getting people on board that idea, and also fixing some of the security problems with that idea before we do it. Is definitely going to take some time.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I think I agree with you totally. Ultimately, there's, to me, from as an audio, I hate the word audiophile. I think it's ridiculous.
I refuse. I am not an audiophile. I come out of a world of recording, and I have an appreciation for good audio. But everything in my career has been about practicality. Like the monitors that I wear, they're practical. They were expensive, but they're practical. The headphones, I still love my Sony HD25s. They're terrible headphones, but they're durable, they're practical, they've got a great clamp on the side of the head, and I could field strip them and replace every single part on them for cheap. It's kind of the joke, you know, it's like you replace the handle on a broom and then you replace the brush on a broom. Do you still have the same broom? And like, well, no. My HD5s are Franken headphones from like they're 10 years old, but every piece at some point has been replaced on these headphones. I've never had to go out and buy $300 headphones just for mixing and monitoring, especially when I'm out in the field. And that's the kind of stuff that I really gravitate towards. It's because I get a humongous bang for buck by buying a professional grade product, not because I'm sitting here and like pontificating about the 3 kilohertz bump in the EQ because of this and how warm and fat. Is it warm? Is it warm, or is it just kind of warm? Is it fat warm? Or is it like exciting warm? You know, like everyone who abuses the word warm in the world of audio.
Yeah, and for me, it's like the real separation between audiophile and like audio enthusiast or someone who's just, you know, practically appreciative of audio in their daily lives. Audiophiles, it's just cork sniffing. You know, it's,
yes, it is.
it's just like, oh, well, I guarantee you that 90% of the people who pay all that money for all that really expensive shit, they don't hear what they bought at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're getting into scientific differences that I would be very hard pressed to meet someone again in a blind taste test, the Pepsi challenge. I would be very doubtful of their ability to detect that. But there is something about reaching that tier where wine is the perfect example. Yeah. I know just enough about wine to get myself in trouble, right? I like inky, black, bold Malbecs. And it's because, in a way, it's also because those are usually some of the more identifiable. I mean, like, if you were to put a Cab and a Merlot right in front of me, I'd struggle to really detect the tannins and the nuances of what makes one grape different than another. But you put a Malbec in front of me, and I'm going to drink this glass of ink, and and that's why I can find it. I find it to be more sort of delineated from the rest of the pack. There is something about reaching that audio tier where you're listening for things that you know you like and that you know you don't, and it takes a little bit of listening to get there. But then you once you reach that point, you do find that appreciation of, man, I'm going to drop the needle for the first time on fresh vinyl. That means something if you're into sitting down and having that tactile experience and listening to audio because of the medium, and the medium is destructive. Every single time the needle hits that record, it's going to change the tone, character, and the information found on this piece of plastic or lacquer or whatever.
Right.
And so there is something that I like about reaching that tier. Beyond that tier, I don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
DGAF, like, just could not degaff less. But in this place that I'm in right now, where I care about bang for buck and I enjoy a texture to the experience, I'm happy to stay there.
Yeah, I've gone through a period a couple of different times where I'll go out and buy old stuff, like old speakers, old amps, that kind of thing, and just really try and discern the difference between what audio was when, especially like in the mid 70s, when the Japanese companies were just making incredible sounding, just tanks of, I had an amp from this company. It weighed 35 pounds. It's like, it was insane, but it was really great.
I know for me, my deep dive is on mics. I've got a mic locker that's worth more than my car. It's my perpetual shame and embarrassment. But like, if I need to hear what something sounds like on the sintered bronze nose cone of an AKG or a D202, or like the original one of those original ULSs, or just something funky, like this is an SM57, and this is actually, I think this is also a 15-year-old mic, because I like to buy things and run them into the ground. But I've got a vintage SM56, the mic that came before this and came after the Elvis mic, the SH55. Like, I need to know what that sounds like, and I need to own it for the one time every 5 years I might actually want to use that mic. So I kind of had my own deep dive. Again, the audio case of gas, your gear acquisition syndrome. I had a bad case of gas when it came to microphones.
Yeah, with recording stuff, I've kind of gone through this whole phase where at first I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and I bought like a cheap all-in-one recording box, and
booth in a box,
and that's
never what you need.
And that's what I'd like sort of learned how to. I'd never recorded a record that wasn't on like 2-inch tape until I bought this little Zoom recording box. But from there I went all the way to like 24 channel 8 bus mixing board, and then all the way back down to like this 2-channel UAD thing.
Right.
But in the middle I was also using, I got a $120 Focusrite thing, and that was fine too. The one thing that I think people don't realize is when you work in audio, and this is true in a lot of different fields.
Yeah, especially technical arts.
It's not really, you learn the tools. And so no speaker is going to sound perfect. The Yamaha NS10s sound like garbage. But they sound like garbage in just the way necessary to make records not sound like garbage.
Right. No, that's a pretty heady concept to get around to, is understanding the limitations. So I mean, like, it's the same thing. Like, I very much doubt that the Neumann U87 $3,000 large diaphragm condenser microphone is the best. I think it's just one of the most familiar. It's the same thing. I say this a lot about Apple products. Apple phones are not intuitive. They are often the opposite of intuitive software design, but they are phenomenally familiar, and Apple does not change things willy-nilly like Samsung might.
Right.
Going from an S6 to an S8. Look at the differences in camera apps, in UI navigation, in how the settings are organized. Samsung will change something that's totally not broken just for the sake of changing it from one phone generation to the next. The S7 camera app is still one of the all-time best smartphone camera apps of all time. So what do they do for the S8? Stickers. You've changed something that wasn't broken just for the sake of changing it. And Apple doesn't do that. So if you were to hand someone, like if someone from the past on an iPhone 3GS, you were to hand them an iPhone 10, they'd still be able to take exactly the same kinds of photos in the same system, in the same format, in the same structure. The muscle memory would be almost identical in that camera app.
Yeah,
and to be able to participate.
I've had people kind of go at me in the comments when I say that, one camera app is more or less intuitive than the other, but the Apple camera app has been so much the same for so long that even
this is why I have a hard time with the word intuitive, because let's break down the Apple camera app real quick. We should probably talk about the iPhone 10 at some point tonight too. But to wrap up my point here about intuitive versus familiar, why do you have a camera app that gives you a whole separate mode for a square mode, but doesn't give you a wide angle or a widescreen mode now that iPhones have 16:9 or taller displays?
Right.
When you're in your video mode, how do you change from 4K at 60 frames per second to 1080p? Or how do you change from like 4K from 60 to 4K at 30? How do you change from HEVC to a more traditional MP4 H.264? You don't in the camera app. You have to leave the camera
settings.
And go to the settings. That is terrible design.
Oh yeah.
Terrible design anytime you're trying to adjust something in a camera and the phone makes you leave your viewfinder. Because I mean, think about you have a proper camera, you never leave the subject that you're focusing on to make adjustments. That's why cameras have all sort of agreed on a certain form factor. Even mirrorless cameras very much resemble DSLRs for that reason. Apple's camera app is terribly unintuitive, but they haven't changed it for so long that it's phenomenally familiar to people that have picked up, iPhones. It focuses you well on some of the basics. It allows you to toggle things like HDR very efficiently. And then if you need to do anything else other than that, it's a frustrating exercise in trying to figure out where you need to go or what you need to change or what you need to adjust. But that's not for you. That's not what Apple didn't make that for you. You have different needs than what Apple wants to address. But for the basics, tap screen, push circle, get photo, it hasn't changed in so long that it feels very familiar. And so people get used to how that feels. They're not fighting muscle memory or their previous expectations when they go from an iPhone 7 to an iPhone 8. That's all the same. Yeah. If you give someone on a Galaxy S7, you give them the Galaxy S8, their photography will suffer for a very short period of time until they get used to the new feel of what Samsung did, because Samsung changed things that they didn't need to change. Yeah. And that's going to cause a momentary struggle, a momentary piece of frustration, one that no one would ever articulate as, oh, I can't work this camera as good. But it's there. And we all know that those things affect us. You get a new car and you're like, I'm trying to operate a motor vehicle, and the muscle memory for where the turn signal is just a little bit different than the car I used to have. It takes you out of the autopiloting of navigating a vehicle, and you're focused on one specific task in the context of driving 2 tons of steel and plastic at 70 miles an hour. That makes us feel uncomfortable. Right. To a much, much smaller degree. The same thing happens with software design when you change dumb things.
And that's a good way to explain the feeling that I have often when I pick up, like, just going from one Android phone to another. It's like, okay, so I can make this anything that I want. I have all that freedom to do it. Now I have to think about that.
Right.
And it is sort of like reality blurring. It's like, okay, my reality.
Well, because and thinking for a second, you're not focused on what you're trying to do with your phone, and you're focused on the phone.
Yeah.
That's not a good place to be either. And you just, like, in reviewing so many different phones, the only way I can make it through the month to month change in whatever I'm reviewing is same number of home screens. Apps are always organized in the same way. Settings are always organized as close to the same way as I can make them. Disabling things that take me away from the overall Android experience and focus on one manufacturer. So, like, the side panels that you can swipe on a Samsung phone, I almost always turn those off because they're just a distraction from the shortcuts that I already know where they are on every other phone, because I always arrange them the same way. And it's one of those things you always, as a reviewer, kind of have to take one step outside yourself to say, like, I don't get a benefit from this because next month I'm going to be on an HTC, and the month after that I'm going to be on an LG, and I'll probably have to visit a Moto sometime in there too. So you might love the smart panel that Samsung has. You might adore Bixby. I don't know. I can't use it because I'm only going to have this phone for a couple of weeks, and I'm going to have to get on with my life and use something else that's very different when I do finally put this phone down.
Yeah, it's I'm only like just now getting into that realm of like, okay, now I have to use like 4 phones at once. So
it's a head trip. I mean, people are like, oh yeah, like you can't get used to that. And you're like, well, first of all, why should I have to? I'm spending $600, $700, $800, $900, $1,000 on a product. Why doesn't the product get used to me?
Yeah.
First of all. And second of all, no, I can't. Because I'm gonna only have it for a couple of weeks, and then I'm gonna have to get used to something else. It's the same thing. Like I'm revisiting the Galaxy S8 to do an after the buzz for Pocket now. And I flipping hate this fingerprint sensor. And I know I'm going to have a whole bunch of cranky bullshit comments. Oh, well, you can't get used to it. Why should I have to get used to terrible asymmetrical design on an $800 phone? Why should I have to get used to that on one of the top tier premium options in the Android space? That's clown shoes. We should all just be able to acknowledge it's clown shoes. And do I think that that's a decision that someone should make to not buy the phone? No. If you're in the Android space and you want a nice product, this should still be on your list until the Galaxy S9 is out. Fine. But we can all sit there and still point to the fact that this is terrible.
Yeah. Well, it's the same with the Note 8. And I couldn't figure out why it was annoying to me. And I couldn't because I just told myself like, oh, I could just not use the fingerprint scanner. And then
but it's a $950 phone.
Well, but then I discovered that like since I work for a university, I have an exchange account, and it's tied to the healthcare network.
Oh yeah, no, you need to keep that on lock.
And so I can't get my work email on my phone unless I am using fingerprint scanner or password.
Yeah.
And trying to get that fingerprint scanner, it's so freaking annoying.
It is. I mean, like that's exactly the kind of thing that reviewers are going to have a different perspective on because of our exposure to a variety of gadgets. And when we join that conversation, if you're team Samsung, you're not going to want to hear it. Oh, yeah. You're going to want to hear that the company you've invested in, that's building part of your lifestyle, is building part of your sense of fashion or sense of self, is putting out a good product, and that we're all happy that the #1 smartphone manufacturer in the world has recovered so well from the Note 7. We can acknowledge that at the same time as we can point out this is a dumb flaw. It really is. It doesn't mean that the phone's a deal breaker, but
yeah, and in some ways, I mean, it's obvious. It's an obvious example of sort of form over function. Like Samsung couldn't figure out how to design the phone the way they wanted it to be designed.
Yeah, well, I mean, and we can definitely, and so we can excuse, or we can justify, or we can point to the history of they wanted a fingerprint sensor under the glass. It wasn't ready to go. Fine. Yeah. But, you know, other companies like LG, for example, have been center mounting. Huawei has been center mounting fingerprint sensors on the back. And so it's definitely a compromise from being so late into the design and manufacturing process of the S8 and the Note that they probably just couldn't move things around in a way that would make everyone happy, while also dealing with the perception of the Note 7 having just gone through battery explosions. Yeah. So you give them that little bit of leeway. You give them that little bit of consideration, but you still point to it and say, come on, that's dumb.
Speaking of battery,
and we know it's dumb because it's not like they're keeping it for the S9. They're fixing it on the S9.
Yeah. Speaking of battery explosions, I tweeted out this thing today. The Verge had a little article along with the GIF of this guy. I think it was in China. He decided to bite into.
Yeah, I saw that. What the heck?
And it exploded in his face.
I've never been happier to see a phone explode. What a dumbass.
Yeah. Again, it's like Tide Pods. it's
well, I mean, it's just like it's like even a step further. You search on YouTube and you can find videos of people like, I'm gonna smash my phone, take a hammer to my phone challenge, and people who are so ignorant of what goes into a device like a phone and what goes into a part of their phone like a lithium-ion battery. Right. What happens when the magic stuff inside there lets out the smoke, the evil smoke of the lithium-ion cell, and you're like. Again, there's a part of me that thinks maybe that shouldn't have warning labels on it. Maybe someone should have paid attention in basic science class in grade school, and we would all be happier, more productive.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Fitter, happier, more productive,
right?
But okay, so speaking of people killing things,
that was a good segue. I'm terrible at segues, so I want to point that out. I'm gonna pump the brakes really hard on your segue to tell you that I liked your segue.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Apple, according to Ming-Chi Kuo, the guy who knows all the things that Apple is or is not going to do, says that the iPhone 10 is going to be discontinued in like the latter 2 quarters of this year. And some people are saying it's because sales have underperformed. They're only going to sell about 60-something million as opposed to the 80-something they anticipated. I have a thought.
What's your theory? What's your hypothesis? Lay it on me.
Okay, so Apple was in this difficult position of needing OLED screens. There not being enough manufacturing capacity in the world for the kind of quantity that they needed. So they had to go to Samsung, and Samsung was the only company that could fulfill that kind of order. So Samsung said, and we're charging you $130 per screen.
Mm-hmm.
And then Apple dumps all kinds of money into LG and their screen technology.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time we get into quarter 3, quarter 4 of this year, I have a feeling that Apple thinks that they'll be able to turn away from Samsung and go toward LG and what they've developed there, and have a lot cheaper screen so that they can no longer pay Samsung for that iPhone 10 screen.
I mean, I see that being the back end. Why do you think that might lead to the death of the iPhone X?
Well, I know what they're going to say it is. They're going to say, oh, it was a special thing for that 10-year anniversary. And, you know, I've already seen
kind of a thing.
Yeah, it's, you know, so people, it becomes collectible or whatever, like the U2 iPod. but I think ultimately, I really think that even though it seems like the iPhone 10 at first blush, you're like, wow, it's a huge success. I think it is not doing as well as Apple really needed it to. And the $1,000 phone experiment has kind of backfired on them.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to untangle because, one, we're never going to get the straight story from Apple. Like, what were they trying to accomplish?
Right.
It's never going to be as clear as like the iPhone 5C. We know what Apple was trying to accomplish there, and that blew up in their face rightfully because it was a crap way to launch a diminished product. It made people feel like they were getting the lesser, and that's never been something Apple has been able to achieve. The iPhone 10 is going to be interesting, if only because Apple has made their game so label conscious. Look at the visceral response that we found in pockets of the internet just from the iPhone 8 being called the iPhone 8 and not the iPhone 7S. Like, any of that matters.
Right.
Like, anyone should give a fuck about a 1-letter designation being different than a 1-number designation. Because Apple's already given up on TikTok, right?
Yeah.
From iPhone 6 to 6S to 7, they don't care.
Yeah.
So why should we care what they name their product anymore? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's like it's funny to look back, say like 8 or 10 years, and look at naming conventions that existed for phones. You know, like I remember having the Motorola Atrix and the and the Samsung Captivate, which was one of the first Galaxy line phones, but it was called the Captivate, and I think it was called other things on other networks.
Yeah, so I've got my Epic right here.
Oh, nice. And
same generation of Samsung, but we had to call it something else because it was on Sprint and reasons.
Yeah. So I think naming conventions, like, nobody could plan ahead and say, like, wow, we're going to release a new cell phone every year. And so we better start numbering them.
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter. They could just come out and say iPhone.
Well, and I think that there's the potential now. I mean, again, we're at a point where there are 8 different active iPhone lines, not counting the different storage capacities as individual SKUs for each one of them. And so I would have been surprised if the iPhone 10, especially in the branding of iPhone letter X, had existed on its own for any length of time. Were we going to get an XS? Were we going to get an XC? Were we going to get an X2? None of that makes any sense. And so it starts to get clumsy when you have iPhone 11 and iPhone 12. They start to sound, you start to make that face regardless of whether you're an Apple fan or not, like 11. Ugh. Like it's just gone on so long. Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them make that pivot and make that change just as a branding necessity anyway.
No,
unless they're serious about iPhone 9, but then it feels like a step back from iPhone 10. But they've got so many little individual things that the iPhone 10 showed them that they needed to fix. You were talking earlier about form over function. Yeah. Apple used to be the company who would never let the function of a gadget interrupt the form. And we literally have a fucking unibrow interrupting an entire chunk of the top of the screen to dock imaging sensors that could have just been a part of the bezel of the top of the display. Right. And you still would have had a ridiculously thin top bar on that phone. It would have been fine. Well, I mean, Samsung shows us, like, it looks fine to have a couple extra sensors there in its own dedicated bezel space on a screen that's already, taking up so much of the front face of that gadget. They didn't need to do that, but they did. And now this is an Apple where the function of the product is interrupting the form to a point where it is affecting further function of the gadget. That's not an Apple that I grew up with.
No, absolutely not. And I made a couple of videos when the V30 first came out that sort of, we knew what the iPhone 10 was going to look like. And then I looked at the V30 and I said, this is what the iPhone 10 is probably supposed to look like. Especially if you get the silver version of the V30, it looks very iPhone-like.
It's gorgeous. If LG had actually been able to get this in store shelves within 2 months of them announcing it, the iPhone 10 would have looked completely derivative.
Yeah.
By design. Yeah. This is the right execution of how you do a 2:1 aspect ratio all front screen device. It doesn't change the way that you interact with the user interface. You still have the same Android navigation controls at the bottom. Apple could have found a way to use Force Touch to replicate the home button experience on the iPhone 10.
Just like Samsung does.
And the back has a fairly minimized camera bulge. It doesn't stick out like it does on the iPhone 10 in an obnoxious position for when you're holding your phone side. I mean, there's so many things wrong with the iPhone 10. I feel that they also kind of need a rebranding exercise to get them into the new line of iPhones after that. And we can get rid of all of this mess, this flea market, this bazaar of iPhones that they're currently selling. Get us back to last year's model, the iPhone 8, the current model, the iPhone whatever, and then maybe you have an iPhone 7 kicking around for like free on contract service providers or something like that. But get us back to one main line of phones each year with a small and a big, and that's an Apple that I'll understand again.
Well, the thing is, like, when they have 8 different versions of the iPhone that you can get, one thing that subconsciously says to the consumer is maybe the other one isn't as good. I mean, how much better could that one be when they're still selling this one?
We know that consumers fall for that kind of psychological trap. Samsung would not be the company it was today if Apple hadn't sued them.
Yeah.
Samsung's success with Galaxy, remember the big name in Android before then was Motorola. We were all talking about droids. Mm-hmm. We weren't talking about Galaxies. it was the Apple lawsuit where they said that there was going to be consumer confusion over how similar these products were. And well, man, you know, like Galaxies are a lot cheaper than iPhones. If they're almost as good, maybe I should just go buy one of those. And
right.
You're absolutely right. You look at this lineup and you're like, well, you know, like I don't need the iPhone 10. I actually think the better phone of 2017 was the iPhone 8 Plus.
Yeah.
I think that was the best phone Apple made new. But then I go, well, but the 8 Plus is so similar to the 7 Plus. Oh, well, you know, like I have a 7 Plus and I actually don't like the size on it. And the phone that I think has done the best job of pairing hardware and software is actually the iPhone SE. And that's like a 2.5, almost 3-year-old phone now.
Right.
No, I'm still gonna just keep using my iPhone SE. Like I don't have any like current bleeding edge. Like I sent the iPhone 8 Plus off to Jaime, the one that we had for a review unit at Pocket Now, and I don't miss it. It's fine. I'm fine on my SE. That's all I need to cover iOS for now.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I am right now too. I feel like probably the 6S Plus is the best value that you can get, like phone to price.
Yeah. Still respectable performance. You got the bigger screen if you need it, and a headphone jack.
Exactly. And the SE, but the SE is like, you know, if you want to have an iOS phone and you don't care about bells and whistles and you don't buy the marketing pitch, then it's a phone that makes sense. And I think, you know,
well, it's a few little things. Like iOS was designed around that form factor screen.
Right.
We have been trying to make iOS work on larger displays.
Right.
But let's not forget, iOS was built. I mean, if we're going to give Apple credit, it was the synergy, the amazing optimization between hardware and software. And iOS was born out of that thumb goes from here to here mentality, right? Well, so the iPhone SE, you start throwing the 6S guts behind it. It's got the better camera. The reduced screen resolution means you're not driving the GPU as hard. That phone still performs like a champ. Yeah. But granted, my iPhone, I've been holding off on it. It's still on iOS 10.3. I haven't updated it to iOS 11. So
yeah,
again, I'm super biased. I need people to know that. But objectively, you're wrong if you think any iPhone after the SE is better. So I think we can all agree on that, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
You just say something with enough like confidence really quickly and then change subjects. That's how you win debates, my friend.
You're like the Gary V of
that is maybe the highest compliment I think I have ever been paid. I have so much love and respect for Vaynerchuk. He is such a badass. Just being mentioned in the same, expulsion of carbon dioxide is a huge plus.
Well, I still think that guy needs to, go half calf or something.
Like take a nap. Come on, man. You're making the rest of us look bad.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, you're right about the iPhone. I mean, if you look at the way that the icons fill the screen, and then pick up a Plus model or pick up an iPad and look at how much dead space there is.
Totally.
It's
now we'll never hear about tech bloggers complaining about wasted space on an Apple product because it doesn't serve the narrative or the advertising metrics or the viewer retention. But having exactly the same dimensions and having exactly the same problem on an HTC, you'll see like hashtag wasted space all over the place.
Right.
But again, it's easy to pick on an HTC because if you make a video for HTC, the search is going to be like a third of what a Samsung search is going to be, which is going to be half of what an iPhone video is going to be. So your monetization's safe if you crap all over Motorola. Right. You're in dangerous territory if you have maybe a few criticisms about a Galaxy, then it gets ugly. So
yeah, and that's the thing. Like I feel like it's really important to like offer some praise, like but also say like this is stupid. Like the HomePod is stupid.
Right.
It's a stupid, insulting product to me. And
right. And Apple made a bad product and they should feel bad.
yeah, well, they didn't even make it. They halfway made it and then they just punted. You know, it's
and we'll curve. It's fine. Just go.
Yeah, it's got
like Johnny Ive is just embarrassed, and he's like, just don't make me do a video on this one, and it'll be fine.
Yeah, if I never hear Johnny Ive say magical again, I will die.
Really I'm so like, how frustrating was that when he was? I can't. Someone can pull up the interview. I'm sure, not the video of it, but the article talking about it, where he's like sitting down and talking to a journalist. He's got his iPhone 10. They've got like an iPhone 7 Plus. And he picks it up and he's just like, oh, this is not the product that I would have wanted to have made. And you're like, you douchebag. Last year, you were telling us how this was like the most amazing phone ever. And in like 1 year, now you're suddenly so conflicted over your design missteps. Like, come on. Don't play that game. Don't be that guy. Don't run away from the fact that you kept this design for 4 generations of product, and now it's just such an eyesore to you. Oh, I can't handle. Like, come on, that's a bad look.
Well, again, it's that thing where it's like, okay, so you're telling me now that
right, that I've made a poor purchasing decision,
and I invested in your product and maybe bought into some of your marketing shit, and you're telling me now that like you're going to turn your nose up at it because you're selling something else.
Right. You're selling something new. And now you need to tell me that the thing I currently have is not good anymore. And that's not how this stuff should work. This is like too many precious metals, too many, materials, too much time, too much effort, too much labor goes into these things for us to make them as disposable as they're trying to make them, when every consumer trend we see is focusing on people holding on to these things longer. I am legitimately running into people with iPhone 5Ss. And you're like, you know what? If it's still working, run it into the ground until it absolutely will not power on anymore, and then shop your options, and it's going to feel like an awesome upgrade.
Yeah.
This conceit of we're going to try and drive the market year to year doesn't work anymore. I had to actually, I revisited the Galaxy S6. This is the S6 Edge Plus, bigger one. I've got a UAG case on it. And it's still a fine phone. Like, I kind of feel like if I were still using this phone today, I'd be okay. And then I go back to like my Galaxy Note 4, which I still hold up to be one of the best phones ever made of all time. And if it had just gotten a little bit more software love, a few more updates, this thing would still be a competitive device in 2018. Not the fastest. It would definitely perform like a lower end mid-ranger, but I would still be able to get pretty much all of my work done, still shoot 4K video, optical image stabilization, still do work in video editing apps, rendering 1080p, if not 4K video from my phone. This thing would still be fine.
Yeah.
But got to drive this artificial desire to be on the bleeding edge, which hasn't really moved that much, hasn't really changed.
And the thing is, like, when I've made these recent videos talking about the SE or talking about the 6S and talking about sort of this, what's the value proposition offered by the latest and greatest newest phone compared to what was available 2 years ago, I've had so many people in the comments saying, I'm still using my Note 4. I'm still, and really, like, when you step back and you think about it, and I feel kind of icky being somewhat complicit in this just by being a tech YouTuber. But we have driven this thing to a place where it's like sports, only more expensive.
And it is. I mean, like sports, it's all wrapped up in this sort of primal tribalism.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been trying to peek in on the live chat. I mean, you guys are actually kind of, talking through things a little faster than I can keep up with. I see a couple people either laughing at me or congratulating me on the Note 4, which my Note 4 is right over there in my bookcase. So I always have it easily accessible because it is one of the best all-time made phones of all time ever. But that doesn't take away from the fact that my current daily driver would be an LG V30. the idea though is like tapping into our sort of monkey or lizard brain aspects of, if I don't have enough food for my community, we're gonna die over the winter, has been gamed into this like multi-billion-dollar industry of what logo you want to slap on the side of your car based on the phone that you have in your pocket, which is gonna somehow match the dollar amount you might spend on a new pair of kicks. You know, like all of these things are kind of wrapped up in a way that I don't want to use a word like insidious, but it's not too far from a word like that, where we're kind of preying on one of the mechanics of the human brain, which is kind of easy to manipulate.
Well, it's, I mean, I'm not going to go too far down the rabbit hole of like, what does the American dream mean and how has it changed from like,
well, but, you know, we're trying to frame it like it's a meritocracy, right?
Yeah.
You know, we're trying to say like, I love all the comments that I get. Like if I'll cover like a ZTE, like the Axon 7 was such a badass mid-ranger phone. That phone was so baller for what it delivered at the price point that it hit. And I'd see people in the comments like, well, I would buy one if it did this, or I would buy one if it were cheaper, or I would buy one if it were a completely different smartphone. And you're like, well, you were never going to buy one. Like, this game that you're playing where you're trying to act as if there was some merit in your analysis of a phone company or a phone brand that you didn't have any interest in, that's a non-starter. That's a non-talking. I would buy this phone if it were cheaper, exactly the same as the phone that I already use, and it also, like, you know, came with a half a ham sandwich. You know, like you weren't a part of that discussion, but someone else might be interested in this product based on the actual things that this phone does have to offer at the price point that it has to offer. I've got so many members of my family that are actually rocking phones like Moto G5s.
Right.
Because they saw a $200 price tag and went, yeah.
And I don't have
to
to
just got on with their lives.
Yeah. And you don't have to pay a monthly or any of that kind of stuff. Like I was on a chat over the weekend with a guy who he covers almost exclusively mid-range and lower range phones.
Yeah.
And his whole thing is like, I have to cover those phones because my credit sucks. And so that's all that I can get into my hands. And there are a lot of people just
in the same boat.
Me. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I mean, you go out and you get that iPhone 10, and most people that are really trying to rock or sport that iPhone 10 are living outside their means. They're on no interest loans, so you have to have at least decent enough credit to land that loan, but you're leasing a smartphone, which has become a ridiculously fragile proposition in 2018. So you got your iPhone 10, you have to have your Apple Care, you have to, because just replacing the back glass is going to cost more than a mid-ranger phone all by itself if you crack a useless part of the phone that is only there for aesthetics.
Right.
So let's play that game. And really, how sustainable is the market for that game? And I have to believe that we're not going to be living in this era for very much longer. I mean, a couple more years of pretending that all glass brittle devices with some pretend water resistance that won't help you when you drop your phone in a puddle and the glass cracks, defeating your water resistance rating, is going to be a way for us to continue pretending that mobile technology is totes a-okay.
Well, that's the thing. I think that eventually we're going to get back to this place where, and this is what I liked about the V series, and even the V30 is still got a good drop rating, but
again, I don't leave the house with my V30 unless it's in some kind of like bumper armor case.
Yeah.
Because that drop rating is independent of its water resistance rating.
Right.
So when we say it's mil-spec 810G drop and shock resistant, it can take a gnarly drop, which is going to destroy the glass on the front and the back, but the device is still going to be functional. Right. And that is separate from its water resistance rating. Where if it's submerged in water, it can go, it's IP68, so it's a couple feet for up to half an hour.
Yeah.
The two don't work together. You drop your phone in a puddle outside your car, and it's instantly not IP68 with water getting into sensitive areas of the phone. If the phone hadn't been dropped into a puddle, it would still be functional, even though it would be smashed.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think that we're, And this kind of dovetails into our next topic of discussion. Like, where are we going with, phones in 2008 and beyond? I look at things like the Samsung Active series.
Yeah.
Bigger batteries. Definitely
the best Samsung phone of 2017 IMO was the Galaxy S8 Active.
Yeah.
The smaller screen paired with the largest battery on any Galaxy phone of the year, with a more lifestyle and ruggedized frame and the flat front screen.
Yeah.
So it was also easier to fit some kind of protection on the screen because it wasn't curved glass.
Right.
Every bullet point that consumers say they care about was satisfied on the Galaxy S8 Active, and yet it was still one of the worst handled launches for Samsung. AT&T now dropped it as an exclusive, which is good for everyone else, but meant that there was no marketing presence behind that phone.
Right.
And it was one of the devices that was the most disregarded. And it's a shame because it's still my favorite line of Samsung devices.
And even if it's not an AT&T exclusive anymore, I haven't seen it in any other carrier store. I haven't seen it on any other carrier website. So it's
actually making it less of an exclusive, I think was more for Samsung to pivot and position in European markets. I don't think it was that they were expecting T-Mobile to suddenly jump on it and pick it up, because it's been associated with AT&T for so long. But because it was an AT&T exclusive and proper exclusive, it was never available in the UK or in the EU without jumping through some hoops.
Right.
So that to me was probably the bigger deal in making that transition.
Yeah.
But you pick it up against a regular S8 or an S8 Plus, and it's like, I've got to have a case on this phone. It's never going to leave the house without a case. And yet when I shoot video of it, the video is going to be naked, because way too many people would complain if I showed you how I really used the phone.
Right. Yeah.
Oh my God, it's so dumb. Just showing. I never drop my phones. I leave comments on YouTube. Not to say that you shouldn't leave comments on YouTube. That's actually, you participate. Just
that was
be a jerk about it.
That was a straw man.
Yeah. yes, it was. Except for the fact that you'll find hundreds. I left a skin on one of my LGs, and it was just like, I can't even watch this video. I can't even watch this. It's just so terrible. Why would you even hide the lines on this? Oh, I want to see what the phone really looks like. You should take the skin off whenever you do. It's like, this is my phone, and this is how I really use my phone. Oh, you want me to lie to you? Okay. I guess this is the game we're playing, Pocket now. Let's do this. Yeah. And so from now on, it's like, I have a box that is full to the brim of iPhone and Galaxy skins, because when I shoot, I have to do the phone naked, but that's not how I use the phone in real life. If this phone is ever going to leave my office and risk being dropped in real world conditions, I need to use the phone how I use the phone. And so that's just a non-starter for me.
Right.
But that's also when I showed the LG V30. Yeah, we can talk about mil-spec 810G. We can talk about IP68. It goes in this. It becomes a much bigger device because I want something I can hold on to. I want something with grip, and I want something that can absorb way more bounce than a tiny metal frame can surrounded by curved glass. This is dumb from a lifestyle technology perspective for the bumps and bruises that a pocket computer has to endure.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's one of those things where there's such an industry that's built up around cell phones now, skins and cases and all this other stuff. And I think that, like, phones have become so pretty.
Right. I mean, again, Samsung, LG, Apple, gorgeous examples of engineering. Yeah. I want to put that under glass and light it museum lighting and put it on a pedestal that's going to rotate really slowly. But I don't want that in my pocket when I'm wrestling a toddler trying to get her in or out of a car seat, and I'm getting messages from my wife that I need to interact with because it's probably something important. Oftentimes it's not. But, a slippery piece of technology, which I'm going to try and use one-handed with my little hobbit hand stumpy thumb and finagle my way through my day. No, I'm not going to play that game. That's a dumb game to play once we start cresting over into the $1,000 territory for one piece of technology before taxes.
Yeah, it's well, and then if you buy the protections, if you buy the insurance, if you buy,
then you kind of have to, right? We live our lives out of these things.
Yeah, yeah, and to me, I think that smartphones are going to start to pivot back. I mean, and there are going to be some people who make headway in the smartphone industry by, like, the Razr phone. I look at the Razr phone as like some sort of indication of what could be on the horizon in terms of screen technology.
Right.
In terms, I thought that Project Linda thing that was at CES was
pretty cool.
Yeah, and yeah. I think that, again, like we were talking about with like home networks, I think that eventually our phones are gonna be a very viable option for our mobile computing. And
so I completely agree. And I think one of the things that was exciting about 2017 was seeing little hints of a return to specialist phones.
Yeah.
I'm back on a Galaxy S8 and it's kind of dull. Yep. It's good at everything. And that's fine. But that's not really what gets me lit up. Not that I'm saying like I want a phone to be bad at one thing, but I want a manufacturer to recognize that it's okay to focus a little bit more on a specific demographic. The Razr phone was an excellent example of that. They tried really hard to say it's not the gamer phone, but it's a phone for gamers. You're splitting hairs there.
Yeah.
But they did it in a good way. You know, 120 hertz refresh rate screen makes a statement about what you can do with that device. Sure. One of the most successful products of 2017 was a return to BlackBerry. This is the best communicator device of 2017, bar none. And again, you can disagree with me, but you'd be wrong. if you live out of communicating and you need epic battery life and you want that experience of like one thumb tactile button press, get the thing I want before I even look at the screen.
Yeah.
You cannot do better than the BlackBerry Key 1. Yeah. There's so much I can do on this phone without looking at it and getting on with my day. I just don't play games on this thing because that would be terrible. And the V30 was, again, another example of just killer multimedia features in a good all-rounder device.
Yeah.
It was exciting to see that. So you bring up things like Project Linda, and I got to play with like Asus's new portable monitor. It's a monitor that's powered off of USB-C. It's got its own battery built into it. And on Android devices, it's just instant screen mirroring.
Yeah.
Which is really exciting. So Project Linda is cool, but it's proprietary. We're already building universal solutions for video out monitoring. Throw that with a Bluetooth keyboard, maybe even a Bluetooth mouse, and you already have a mini phone-based portable laptop solution, which is way smaller than carrying around an actual laptop. I did everything on CES this year for my phone. Yeah, I shot video, recorded voiceover, wrote scripts, did all of the editing, did all of the rendering in 4K, all from an LG V30. And it didn't let me down. And it wasn't that much slower than working the way I used to work from my laptop. Right. So we're there. We're there. We have a little refining to do around incorporating mobile into a mainstream production workflow, but you can do it.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think for 2018, hopefully we'll see expanding that idea at the same time as I hope we see a few more companies just returning to other designs for phones. I'd love to see another moto maker give me a bamboo back or a leather back phone. Yeah. Carbon fiber can be tricky to work with things like antenna and reception, but why not Kevlar? We had a Kevlar back on a phone that was badass, and it's a premium material that you can advertise as premium, and it's not glass.
Right.
I know they're going to go ceramic, and ceramic is cool. It's slippery and it's glass-like and it's brittle, but it's a little bit more durable than glass is. So that could be another potential thing too. But let's get back to sapphire. Maybe even have a limited edition $5,000 phone with a synthetic diamond screen. Let's do something that actually warrants the the notion that it's a premium device, but rewards you for it being a premium device, not just like it's the red version of our phone.
Yeah.
More monies.
Well, I think HTC made a sapphire version of the U11. It was a limited run and it cost some obscene amount, but I thought that was it was kind of cool, and yet at the same time I'm like, that's sort of like the Apple Watch Edition, where it's
well, again, it depends on what you're doing. So I mean, like I think for 2018, LG has some potential with what they're doing. I doubt very seriously they will realize that full potential. But getting away from having a phone launch at the beginning of the year where they're fighting Samsung for manufacturing lines on new chipsets, like that's what kind of messed up the G6. They wanted to beat the Galaxy, but they also couldn't get their hands on the Qualcomm 835. So they went with the Qualcomm 821. And that felt like a little bit more of a compromise than people, I think, in the tech space, in the echo chamber of Android fans. A lot of people sat out on that phone, even though it was a fine performer. Like the G6 was genuinely a good phone. It just went up against newer components in a more established brand that does a ton more advertising. Of course, the Galaxy S8 was going to wipe the floor with the G6. But you get away from that initial pressure at the beginning of the year. You maybe put out what would have been the G7 alongside what would have been the V40. You make it the big little version, just like you make with an iPhone. You know, I think they're going to call the rumor is it's going to be called the Icon. So it's the LG Icon and the LG Icon Plus. At the end of the year, you beat Apple to the punch. You actually announce, you release, and you move it into stores. If you can get ahead of Apple by a couple weeks, LG is going to be a bit more competitive if they can get behind some better advertising.
I don't understand like how they can be as terrible at advertising as they are. And
they're tragically bad.
Yeah.
Moto actually found some kind of cool, funky branding for their modular setup. LG advertising is basically terrible. And they give up on advertising as soon as the product's been released.
Yeah.
So you still see Apple commercials like every day. It's not like there's a new Apple, an iPhone coming out tomorrow. No, you need a consistent presence in the market to remind consumers that you exist. Whatever LG does, like, I know, let's have Joseph Gordon-Levitt sing happy dancey songs while we talk about the V20. You're like, that's not a happy dancey phone. That's a baller getting work done, shoot a ton of video and listen to some awesome music phone. Not a frivolous, let's drum in a subway kind of phone. It's ridiculous.
I think what they were trying to communicate was like, you can be on the go and be creative and be, all these things, but it didn't show Joseph Gordon-Levitt holding the phone and like
right. There's nothing to link it to the device that they were trying to advertise. Again, it's just I've worked in Hollywood and out of casting and commercial casting for way too long to look at what LG is trying to accomplish there and think like that any of it was successful in any way, shape, or form. There is actually a V30 commercial. If you have YouTube TV, they were buying ad spots on YouTube TV. I don't know about any other streaming or cable cutting services, but it's just this dour anthemic, like call to arms and what I can do and what I will do and what I should do. And at the end, it's just like the LG logo and a V30 spins. And you're like, none of that had anything to do with the phone. You never showed the phone until the end, which is where the commercial gets cut off anyway.
Right.
You spent so much money on ad. Why? Why did you do that?
It's like they understand that they need to take people's lives and connect and make some sort of connection between the device, but they don't make the connection.
No.
And
they're trying to make an emotional appeal or an appeal to absurdity, like with the LG G5 Jason Statham commercials. But it never makes it back to what can the product do and why should you care? I think one of the all-time best tech commercials, not just of last year, but I mean like of all time, was the iPhone, and not of last year, it was the year before. It was the iPhone 7 water resistance commercial. The guy's getting all suited up to go for a bike ride. It's storming outside. Your AC/DC playing in the background just as the garage door comes up. He's got his iPhone on his bicycle mount. Thunder! And you're like, I got goosebumps the first time I saw that.
Yeah.
Water resistance is not new. Like, water resistance is not an exciting feature in the world of smartphones, but Apple packaged that together in a way that talked about one specific aspect of the phone and made that resonate. Yeah. And made it feel badass, and it made you feel powerful, and it made you feel cool. And no wonder Apple is totally dominating the advertising game. And Samsung does this phenomenally well too. I don't mean to slight Samsung ads, but then you turn around. Where is the LG commercial talking about the fact that they do objectively, no question, I'm not joking here, they have the absolute best headphone jack that's ever been put into any mobile device ever.
Right.
And where is the one commercial telling consumers like, hey, do you listen to audio? Is that a thing you do a lot of on your phone? Why not have the best? Yeah, you know, there is an option for that. And it's not like we can kind of dance around, oh, well, maybe Samsung's good, or I have a subjective opinion on the tonality or character or color of the, HTC headphone dongle. No. The V20, V30, it is the best.
Yeah.
But they won't even make a commercial about it. So, of course, they're sort of destined to lose.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, why go to the effort of including high quality DAC, amp, all that kind of thing, if you aren't going to say, if you aren't going to be like, this crushes the iPhone's dongle, just say like, you can either have this $9 thing, or you can have the best thing that's ever been put in a
I love plugging really high quality headphones into this thing. This is so good. Yeah. And then you lose it and you're totally SOL.
Yeah. It's, I'm such a huge fan of LG's devices, but they can't find a way to sell them.
Right. Well, and I always have to be really careful too. It's because I love LG hardware, but then we have to have a whole other deep dive on like LG needs much better support mechanisms. They need much better relationships with their customers, and they have to get after software updates.
Yeah.
And so, like, again, nothing is ever just as clean and as simple as, oh, I want the best phone. What's the best phone? There are always pros and cons, but I side with LG because I'm a hardware guy. Right. Like the V20 and the V30 are amazingly frustrating devices to like if you want up-to-date security patches. Right. But I'm making that compromise for myself specifically. I can't ask anyone to make that compromise for themselves just because I'm # Team LG. In fact, I'll talk a lot of people out of it if I don't feel like they're really going to benefit from what a V series phone has to offer. Like you're coming to me with like $5, cheap Chinese dime store earbuds. Don't get a V. Don't. Why? You're not going to get anything out of it. One of the main killer features is that you can really pump some tunes and drive nice headphones. We have to play that game. So
yeah, I think that there's such a huge market for people who, people who are pissed off about the headphone jack going away. And LG has this opportunity to say, not only do we still have a headphone jack, but it's better than any headphone jack you've ever had in a phone.
And not only better, it's also one of the smartest implementations of analog tech that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
You're talking about a tunable amp that detects the impedance of the output source connected to it.
Yeah.
There's nothing else like that. Nothing else like that. I've got a FIO that's kind of gathering dust, and it's a badass little portable music player. It is really good. But if I move between like a pair of lower impedance earbuds and my nicer cans, it's on me to dial back the volume before I blow my ears out.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
The V30 genuinely delivers a feature that I've never seen before on portable audio equipment to make sure that you are maximizing the output for the headphones and speakers and line connected to them.
Yeah.
That's actually really fresh, on top of genuinely offering the highest quality audio playback I've ever heard with one of the loudest amps to properly drive nicer headphones. That's incredible. And LG said dick.
Yeah.
About any of it.
And let's think about it this way. If Apple had that feature, what would they do?
They'd make a commercial about it. And there would be one commercial specifically dedicated to that as a lifestyle feature that you didn't know you needed to have, but now you need it.
Yeah. And you can think of many examples of Apple having done that. Those shot on iPhone commercials,
right?
Were just such a great way to say, this is what the camera can do.
Right.
And so if you're a creative, here's a phone that's purpose built for you. It has better microphones. It has, better headphone jack. It has all of this stuff that you need as a creator to be able to do the thing you do. And, like you going to CES and using the LG V30 for all your video out of there is a better advertisement for the V30 than LG ever did.
And I mean, it's not like I was going out of my way to say it's like, oh, well, because I'm an LG fan, I'm going to do this. There were reasons. And I actually did a recap video if anyone wants to check it out. There were reasons why I picked that phone over, actually a phone that runs smoother, like the Note 8. Or the Pixel, which has phenomenal image stabilization for the video. There were very specific reasons why I ended up on the V30. But still, I kind of feel like that was more talking about what the phone has to offer people than I've ever seen LG do outside of South Korea.
Right. So, I mean, my hope in 2018 is that we start to come back to a more intelligent way of bringing phones to us. It's one of those things that I guess I just want to see people like not buy the shiny thing, but we've gone past peak phone now, where there are choices that can be made, and they can be made on real criteria, as opposed to just it's the best.
Well, and it is getting out of that singular all or nothing, black or white, Samsung or Apple kind of dichotomy. But I don't see consumers really gravitating out of that, because I also think smartphones have kind of plateaued.
Yeah.
I think the reason why some of us are getting really excited about some of these other offerings is because I get excited about a specialist device that does something better than anyone else can do.
Right.
That's why I got so excited about the BlackBerry Key 1. I'm not expecting general consumers to jump on that bandwagon, but I need people who do care about those aspects of their daily lives to understand that they do have a choice. And because smartphones have become such a commodity, that they become so ubiquitous, and that they're not sexy and exciting like they were when we first launched the iPhone, that it's okay to stray. Like, it's okay to leave Team Apple or Team Samsung if there is something you specifically need to get done. But the problem is just letting people know that they even have that option.
Right.
I mean, the conversation we just had about LG is sort of emblematic of that. Like, BlackBerry isn't out there with a ton of ad buys. TCL's making some great hardware, but they're not like, really knocking down anyone's doors to make a big deal out of those products. And you can kind of exist with us as your marketing arm for a while, but it's not sustainable. And over this next year, I think it's just going to further entrench why Samsung and Apple continue to dominate the North American space to the degree they do. It's something like 80%. Or over 80%, it might even be something like 85% of smartphones sold in the United States are Apple or Samsung.
Yeah.
If a company doesn't get serious about joining the conversation with consumers, where consumers are, and putting boots on the ground, putting up mall pop-up shops and kiosks and make an LG living room experience in the middle of like a downtown shopping center, you know, that kind of stuff, then you're basically irrelevant.
Well, I mean, I think about BlackBerry as this, again, there are feature sets within all the BlackBerry phones that can be really attractive and valuable to a certain subset of people. And it used to be that, you know, BlackBerry was the business phone. If you were a business person and you needed to have on-the-go communication, BlackBerry was the only thing to do. And iPhones were looked down upon because they didn't have the same security. They didn't have all this other stuff. It's, you know, BlackBerry has an opportunity, and now I think they have some hardware that's
to back it up.
Yeah. Whereas, like, I really liked what was the BlackBerry from like 2 years ago, the one that slid up like a little.
Oh, the Priv. Yeah. See, again, I think that would have been a great. We can get way deep in the weeds. They got burned by a terrible processor generation. The phone was great. It was such a fun phone to use, but Qualcomm blew up. I think another one of the reasons why Samsung and Apple are the forces they are today is almost exclusively Qualcomm's fault, from the Qualcomm Snapdragon 810 and 808 being such terrible chipsets, because HTC's ran terrible that year, LG's ran terrible that year. The Priv was a disturbingly hot phone to have in your pocket all the time. Like, you couldn't charge it and use it at the same time. If you were updating apps with the screen off, with the phone plugged in, the battery would still drain. And that's not what a BlackBerry is. A BlackBerry should be a phone that lasts you 3 days on a single charge.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think these companies have to recognize the opportunities that they have to slip into some really unique spaces in the market.
Fill some of the gaps, because there are some huge gaps between Galaxies and iPhones.
Yeah. And, you know, you made an interesting point about how some companies seem to be relying on the YouTube community to help them sell their products, and yet YouTube, in YouTube fashion, has sort of just, I guess,
gutted the playing field for smaller and upcoming producers to have a fair shake at the same kind of monetization options that we had when we were coming up.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean,
not to put words in your mouth.
Well, I'm kind of two minds on this. Right. And one of them comes from being, you know, somebody who worked his way through the music industry, you know, has written books and been involved with the publishing industry. And so YouTube and what Google has done with YouTube is such a different playground, because you don't walk into the music industry at the ground level and start making money, you know? And
why is that?
Well, because there's an entire system built in that, like,
right. So isn't it expected that part of the system that you're working in when you jump in, because I would imagine the music industry was probably similar to how I came up in the entertainment industry, where there's a notion of sort of an apprenticeship.
Yeah.
You're not making money, but you're getting an education. So outside of the YouTube creator school of useless blog posts that YouTube serves you, where is the educational experience other than you just keep doing things all on your own in a vacuum until you find something that works on YouTube?
Well, it's interesting because, like, there's a cottage industry of YouTube channels out there that are specifically about that, like people like Roberto Blake and Daryl Eves and Tim Schmoyer, and they all got a slightly different take on things.
Well, they all have significantly different takes on what worked for their channels, but that's also kind of like where I was leaving voiceover as a casting director, where you go and Google like how to get into voiceover, and you'll find a couple dozen different people whose main career is now selling voiceover.
Right.
Not actually performing as a voice talent, but selling the method or the process by which you can become successful in voiceover. And so while there is definitely some great material out there and a lot that you can learn from other YouTube producers, there is no system or way that you can glean from that kind of content to become successful at YouTube. You basically have to do it yourself.
Yeah.
And when we came up, we could build towards that. So I know it took me about 1.5 years to get my first check between writing a blog, using AdSense, and tying my AdSense into my YouTube channel. I'm sure you were probably in the same boat. You said it took you like 3 years to get your first check.
Yeah, it
YouTube,
was
something like that.
It was it was something like that. It's that whole like, well, you have to get $100 accrued thing.
Right. You have to build up that first $100. So while you were learning your craft, you were still participating and building content for a platform. That platform benefited from your work in a very long tail way, but benefited by having searchable content that was advertiser friendly, that people could consume, and you accrued that talent and that wealth at the same time.
Right.
And you eventually built up into getting your first $100 payout. The tools that they're taking away from smaller content producers, I find reprehensible. At the same time, they're taking away the incentive to build up that first $100 check while learning about how to improve their craft. And they're just being thrown into the water. You have to compete against Marquez. You have to compete against MKBHD. You have to compete against us at the mid-tier in the 30 to 50,000 subscriber level. You have to compete against Dom Esposito. You have to compete against Team Crispy. You have to compete against, beauty bloggers that have an army of people making their videos look awesome, because we know those beauty bloggers aren't all about video editing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But along the way, even though you're producing content that will benefit the YouTube platform, you don't see a dime until you reach these arbitrary metrics.
Yeah.
And that to me is what I find a completely inadequate response to the things that actually make the YouTube brand tarnished. Every single time a Logan Paul goes out and acts a fool, advertisers walk away from YouTube as a platform. Yeah. But nothing about these changes make this any better for bringing advertisers back. You didn't address the problem, but YouTube's afraid to lose the views of a cat like Logan Paul. You need those numbers, you need those metrics, but Logan Paul doesn't need YouTube. He's got his own merch store.
Yeah.
He's got his own advertisers and branding deals. So he's not really pulling money from those advertisers anyway. So YouTube should be able to say, fuck him, and we'll make sure that we're building the most robust tool set to bring people up into producing better content. But that's not what they're focused on. They're focused on YouTube TV. They're focused on YouTube Red. They want to be the next Netflix or the next cable TV provider. And that means those of us, especially those of us in the mid-tier, in this 30 to 50,000 subscriber range, we just have to work all the harder for the same benefits and perks that we used to have. It's a disastrous turn of events for anyone who's looking to build a channel in 2018.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on with a lot of that. At the same time, like, well, commenting on the Logan Paul thing, I think that they should have offered no quarter. They should have just kicked the guy off the platform. I
completely agree.
They should. If you're showing what he showed, it's not even worth talking about the fact that it happened, but that it was on the trending page. It was,
or if we're gonna be fair, that he was just a dumbass who made a terrible life mistake, and maybe he can come back from that. Let's see Logan Paul survive with the might and force of a search engine company making his videos practically invisible, so that new people aren't finding his videos because of the way that he can game algorithms.
Right.
Like let's actually make a statement about what YouTube is willing to do to protect their relationships with advertisers, because we're not the ones giving them problems, but every single one of my videos is now automatically demonetized. Yeah. So what are we really trying to fix here, and what are we trying to address? And it's the same reason why I've been so vocal about trying to find small form factor, small community building exercises off of YouTube. Yeah. Like we're all pals on Twitter, and I'm trying to make sure that we're all pals on Reddit. You know,
Yeah.
like let's see if we can drive discussion somewhere else, because YouTube is taking tools away from us. They're taking search engine finds away from us. I can't tell you, I can't tell YouTube enough that I'm not really interested in Philip DeFranco. That dude is always in my recommended list of videos. I click every single week. I'm not interested, and I don't care about what Phil DeFranco has to say. Please stop suggesting videos of mine, and I'll refresh the page, and there's Phil DeFranco. Yeah. I know I'm not getting that kind of search preference. I'm pretty sure you're not getting that kind of search preference. And we have to go out there and actually, like, as close to politician style, shake hands with every single viewer who comes our way, replying to nearly every comment that comes our way, responding to nearly every tweet that comes our way.
Yeah.
And for as much as I respect the hell out of the dude's hustle, Marquez doesn't have to do that.
I don't know.
MKBHD is going to be fine. He's good. But someone coming up, someone with 600 subscribers on their channel who was monetized, bringing in a trickle of income, learning how to better produce their craft, all of that just got taken away from them. And that's horseshit.
Well, and most people say, like, oh, so you're making $40 or $50 a month, and that's, you know, that's not very much. It's a few $100s a year. You're right.
There's a value for the platform in having advertiser-friendly content. And they're taking that value away from the very people that are actually maintaining and building the long tail aspect of YouTube. Right. YouTube can, you know, again, there are two methods of thought. Do you want the tent pole? We're only going to support people that have humongous channels who make one big video that gets millions of views and then it disappears because it's so timely or so topical? Or do you also want to have a backlog of content that you can keep people on the site consuming that content over a longer period of time? It's those producers that are fulfilling the second half of the value proposition of a platform like YouTube. And again, they're the ones who are disproportionately affected negatively by this kind of move. And the fact that we're even pretending that this could be about community or about making sure YouTube's really getting in the way of bad actors, all you've done is just incentivized other outlets to start doing things like creating bot farms that will now not only give your videos views, but you can also pay to give your videos extra watch time. That's all you've done, which makes the platform even less desirable for advertisers in the future. Because it's now playing the Facebook game where a view is basically whatever you see as you scroll through your timeline. Right. I saw a video almost start to load. Well, that's a view. That's not a view. You didn't have any interaction there. Facebook's metrics are totally specious. They're totally fake. And now YouTube is going to kind of force a lot of people to play the same game.
Yeah, and it's the kind of thing where there have been moments in YouTube's history where people, you know, people try to figure out ways to game the system, and then they see people like Logan Paul or PewDiePie or somebody like that who seemingly just like walked into it and then make really bad decisions and not get punished for it.
Well, because again, it taps into that monkey primal lizard brain of humanity, something we haven't evolved out of. And so when you have something with these types of barriers to entry, you're not incentivizing hard work, learning about your craft and improving your product. You're incentivizing a short-term dopamine hit of something ridiculous. And that's what's going to cause, I mean, that's what people are going to focus on, because you can build that really quickly. You can build that very quickly by being an asshole on the internet, getting people either really lit up or pissed off, or getting people to laugh at you sort of like jackass style. And what do we see on YouTube? What content is actually making it to the top in terms of, you know, really fast growth, ridiculous mentions, ridiculous, you know, sharing, and it's bad behavior styles of channels, which near instantly become far more popular than people who are trying to dedicate into improving their content and building an actual community around certain discussion points in a more grown-up fashion. You know, we're old and boring and dull compared to someone who's going to go and completely make a fool of himself and mock Japanese culture. And it's not even just the making fun of suicide. Every single antic that he had in Japan was entirely disrespectful to their culture, made Americans look like dipshits, and he still gets to monetize off of that. You know, like, because he got a lot of views. Well, of course, you're gonna lock up that 12-year-old market who can harass their parents for things and to buy products. But again, that's a bad look if advertisers are really trying to go after the people who control the purse strings.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where, again, like, I know from my own experience that, like we were talking about before, however you get to wherever you're going to get on YouTube or anything else in life is not going to be some sort of scripted thing.
Well, and I watched your video, and I absolutely agree with the fact that there's no process for creative endeavor.
Right.
You know, like, if I want to be a lawyer, there's a system that you can go through to become a lawyer with reasonably predictable results as to who will become a lawyer and who won't become a lawyer. The problem I have is the one commonality that a lot of creative endeavor has is some notion of apprenticeship.
Yeah.
You know, back in the day, you would like clean horse stables and do manual labor for a chance at exercising your craft, like if it was metalwork. But you would also have a roof on your head and food in your belly.
Yeah.
You know, that's what's being taken away from people now in the digital space as we continue to devalue the various roles involved in creative endeavor. Like, when I started in voiceover, it was pretty common. Like, if we were doing an audiobook, you would have the talent, you would sometimes have the author, you would have an editor, you would have a recording engineer, and you'd also have a copy editor who would make sure that the talent didn't mess up on a line. It was not uncommon to have 6 people in studio to have a wonderful narrator deliver an audiobook in the most beautiful fashion, captured in the best possible way. And now you've got like audiobooks being cut out of someone's closet for like 15 cents a finished page of reading.
I've watched that guy's videos.
Right? You know, and it's a one-person endeavor. So again, we can't always have like the nice luxury of what we had before, and progress is going to kind of cause this lowest common denominator thinking to impact how we get work done. But what's happening with YouTube right now is eliminating what little building someone would have had. When I started, we had this goal. $100 cap, get my first AdSense check. Let's build towards that. Let's work towards that. And along that first $100 check, I got way better at producing content and had clear sights on that first goal. So, you know, like, it took me about 1.5 years to get my first check. My second check, I cut that in half, you know, and every single check after that, then it became the game of like really trying to learn the system, doing outreach. All of that kind of got caught up in building something. And now it's, the goal is not as enticing to get my 1,000 subscribers and my 4,000 hours of watch time to then start the process of monetizing my videos while I am producing content that enriches YouTube as a long tail platform.
Right.
People are still going to produce content, and YouTube cannot be the metric by which people determine their own success. In that, I completely agree with you. But that's also why, if a competitor ever does arise to YouTube, I would be shocked if a number of people didn't gravitate towards that competitor. If people are watching this and they're interested in producing content, I know some people have mentioned like Patreon in the chat here. Well, Patreon does depend on sort of a popularity contest before you can get money.
Exactly. Yeah.
But why not go and produce video or podcasts and send them directly to archive.org?
Yeah.
You can upload video to archive.org. You can upload audio to archive.org. You know, what's tying you to YouTube? Maybe you can build views and a community off of that, and then take that to Patreon and never have to worry about what kind of conversation you might have with YouTube's arbitrary metrics in producing content or building a fan base before they'll deign you with the respect of monetizing your videos.
Right.
So those types of opportunities, again, what's frustrating is we had a platform with YouTube that I think actually celebrated the home content creator.
Yep.
And now that's gone. So what good is YouTube if that's gone? And I struggle to come up with an answer for that.
Yeah, I think YouTube is in some way set itself up to be, instead of being the center point of what you're instead of being the center point of what you're doing, it becomes like another spoke in a wheel. It just
well, and I am, again, if anyone's watching this, like as we're 2.5 hours into a podcast, if anyone's still paying attention to anything I might even be trying to say at this point, I would say 2018 needs to be the year that all of us diversify.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about starting up some kind of content creation machine, don't create just to be popular on one platform or one metric.
Right.
Like being Facebook popular doesn't help you, because after you get to a certain tier, we know Facebook is going to be screwing with their algorithms to make sure that you have to spend even more to reach the people that already follow you as a content producer.
Right.
YouTube is going to pull the rug out from under you to start, and there's no guarantee that they won't move the goalposts on you again if there's another adpocalypse problem. Right. I am going to be launching a Patreon probably in the next week to start seeing if I can expand on the conversation beyond just YouTube. And I'm looking at Patreon as a way to fulfill a significant amount of content. Very, very low dollar goals for people that want to support directly. Well, I can produce content specifically for that platform, in addition to dropping videos and podcasts off on archive, making sure that I'm keeping my Instagram up to date, and diversifying in every single way that I feel like I can creatively add to a conversation. And YouTube is probably not going to be long-term the first resource or the first stop for the new content that I create. It might become the second place or the third place or the fourth place where I look to fulfill part of that conversation, because especially, your participation on Twitter.
Right.
YouTube is not the primary way that we all have these conversations. It's just one aspect of how we have these conversations, and they're trying to make themselves irrelevant. Who am I to stand in their way? Let them be irrelevant.
Yeah, it's it's the interesting thing for me, because I did start a Patreon, and I've got a few people supporting me. But one thing that I've discovered about Patreon, and it's always about scaling at this point. It's like, for me, as somebody who, I still have a day job, I still have, all these other things that I do. One thing that's really challenged me is how do I add value enough to make the Patreon worthwhile to other people?
And I've definitely been struggling with that too.
Yeah, and I haven't found the right answer, and some people who came on early in the Patreon have decided to move away, and I don't know how to really build it out. I've got to
and it's a difficult conversation, because what I'm really trying to do, I think I might do a preview for mine, over the weekend before I launch, just to kind of get some feedback from other people in the community. The problem is always going to be balancing that value proposition with what you can actually deliver. And so for me, right now, I'm still doing some work with Pocket Now. I've gone to being a part-time producer, but that's still monetized content that I'm producing. And I have a relationship with Newegg, and I'm doing a live broadcast with Newegg, and that's monetized content. And it's really about like little small amounts of money all over the place. Right. And so in a world where I'm picking up little bits of income here and little bits of income there. I wrote a book on smartphone photography. I'm getting little bits of income from that book, getting little bits of income from Amazon affiliate links. The Patreon fits into that for me in a way where I expect very little out of people supporting me directly. Like I don't want it to be a burden. I think time and money are especially precious for all of the people that want to consume content online. And so for some of the conversations that I would like to expand on, I can do that organically in very short form factor, small form factor ways that then directly tie into, maybe you want more behind the scenes on how we produce a live broadcast through Newegg. Maybe it is expanding on the podcast that I used to produce with more comedians in cars getting coffee kinds of conversations with my favorite tech producers and tech, famous people in the space. And that's something that I think I can easily provide in a way that doesn't disrupt the work that I'm already doing. It just it adds to the work that I'm already doing, but the Patreon would give me the resources to do it better. So it's already the work that I would have been doing regardless. If you follow me on Twitter, you follow me on Instagram, you'd be seeing some of this stuff already. But if you want something better than what I'm able to currently post is just like one-off Instagram photo or a couple snippets of video that get linked directly on a Twitter feed, then that's what I feel like the value proposition would be. At least just from what I've been trying to experiment with. And once I launch it, I'll probably be totally wrong anyway, and I'll have to pivot and evolve and change with what my audience wants me to do.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, I feel like I had a thought process about what I was going to get going on the Patreon, like, offer more access, offer some additional perks but I didn't necessarily have that infrastructure in place.
Right. It's a lot like Kickstarter, like you have a little widget and you want to sell it for $20, and all you need to do to fund the first batch is get 100 backers, and something blows up and all of a sudden you've got to deal with trying to fulfill orders on 500,000, and you can't just instantly jump to that scale, but you already set prices at a tier for 100 widgets. So how do you make that transition? And I think one of the dangers of something like Patreon is, well, I see that you've got a bunch of people supporting you on Patreon. So now you should be able to instantly launch into like doing cinematic 8K video with like beautiful cinematography and amazing editing. And you're like, that you're still going to get me. I need to like make this clear, but what we can do is give you a better version of me. Sure. But that doesn't fundamentally change what it is that I do, what I like to do, and what I like to talk about, and how I like to approach these types of topics.
Yeah.
And that's also, part of the difficulty and value. I've seen people who kind of get burned on things like, well, at the $20 a month tier, you can get like an hour of Skype chat with me. And I know my schedule. My schedule is crazy, and I have a 2-year-old and a toddler, and like, there's no way I can legitimately offer that.
Right.
And expect people to be able to interact with my schedule on my terms for their perk. So that won't be one of my perks. Right. But what I can do is I wrote a pretty good book on smartphone photography. So maybe at one tier, if you support me for at least 1 month at a certain tier, I'll give you a copy of the book. And that gives you access to every update that I ever write for that book.
Right.
You follow me for 1 month, you get a copy of my book, and for the rest of time that I support that book, you'll get those updates too. Like that to me feels like a fair transaction to have,
right,
for that kind of a relationship. So those are the kinds of things that I'm looking at in trying to enrich the experience and provide a little behind the scenes, because I'm still learning a lot about my own video production prowess. Like, I'm an audio kid too. I came out of spoken word recording, because I don't know if you guys notice this, but I talk a lot.
I think somebody mentioned that in the comments.
And I was like, you know what? Fuck that guy. I'm going to talk.
Yeah, that's what you've got to do. It's a podcast. We're talking here.
But like, there's so much, and especially in the audience that I have, that I think they're interested in having these conversations about improving their own content too. That's the more interesting community. I'm kind of tired of trying to pretend that I'm the expert, right? I'm not. I'm an expert about a few things, but I'm not an expert about everything. And one of the guys that I'm most inspired by in that kind of style is what's his name? He did Dirty Jobs, Mike Rowe.
Yeah.
I'm so much more impressed by when I do meet an actual expert in their field and have them share what they can learn, and we can all learn from what they have to offer. That's where I kind of want to go. I think that's so much more value than what I can pretend to deliver as a single content producer in Los Angeles. But I'm surrounded by the film industry. I'm surrounded by the audio and music industry. I'm surrounded by the video game industry. My wife works for Activision. It's kind of rad. We can blow that conversation up pretty easily and make it bigger and make it better and provide some fresh perspective on that by me just getting the fuck out of the way, but giving a platform to people who know better than me. And right. That's really what I hope to be able to deliver.
Yeah. And that's one thing that, I guess that I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher now for she's more than a decade. You know, it's like my second life. But I want to sort of share my vantage point on how, like, okay, so maybe I have something to offer at this point about like how I do YouTube, or
Right.
you know, and that's not just like what camera to buy or whatever.
Right. What are the top 5 best vlogging cameras? Tell us.
Yeah, and I watch some channels like Think Media TV and all that kind of stuff, and I think those guys are providing like a very low level, you know, sort of right at the entry point service to a certain group of people.
But there's no philosophy, and especially because your background in education and having a background in the recording industry, there's an art to it, but there's also a science to it. Technical arts are my favorite because you do need to learn a little math and science. And then once you know the rules of the game, you have a world of opportunity in the free expression or expanding on the topic or just coming up with a style.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm still working, because my videos are just okay. You know, like I have fun putting them together, but I'm proficient at recording the audio for them. I'm still like, you know, like I just got my first fluid head for my tripod,
right?
You know,
right,
like
yeah.
I've been at the YouTube game for like almost 10 years, and finally, like, you know what sucks is when I try and do a panning shot, I should spend $100 on a fluid head.
Or you could do what I did and spend like $35 on a cheap knockoff fluid head and still not be able to do the panning shots that you want to do.
Oh, dude. I mean, like I was doing panning shots off of like ball head tripod heads and pulling them off decently, but like that's not the way to work. That's not how you're supposed to do this. You need the right tool for the right job. If someone were coming to me about microphones, I'd be like, well, don't get that one. That's a dumb thing to do. And here I am trying to like rubber band my way, MacGyver my way through a panning shot. It takes like 10 times longer than it should. It's ridiculous.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, as much as I admire what people like MKBHD, Jonathan Morrison, those guys,
right?
I mean, in terms of the quality of the product that they're putting out, looks great. Everything's, you know, as they say, on point. And
totes crispy. I don't know if they're
yes.
still doing Team Crispy. I shouldn't be making fun of Team Crispy. I actually really like those guys.
Okay, you can make fun of them because they made T-shirts. Okay, they made T-shirts that said Team Crispy on them.
Oh, okay. Well, how about this? We'll make fun of the hashtag and the T-shirt, but I actually really do like most of their work.
The thing is, they've sort of, for guys like us who are in that mid-tier, like there's no freaking way I can get that kind of fidelity.
Yeah, I can't jump directly to that level, no.
And
also, I mean, it's also part of the disingenuousness of some of those channels where it's just like, hey, I'm a cool guy just talking about this phone and it feels real good in the hand, because most phones aren't designed to have like razor blades and jagged edges on them. But that's an observation that I'll put out there. But I'm going to talk to you like I'm all cool and I'm all over this. But it's just me and you having this conversation and just being chill. And I'm not going to tell you about the guy who's running my camera, or the editor who's putting this all together, or the musician that I'm licensing these tracks from, or all the other people that help with things like grip and lighting. It's just me and I'm your boy. You know, it's that kind of thing that I find most objectionable. It's like every broadcast at Newegg. So it was funny, like we do a live broadcast at Newegg, and the first time I did this, I actually kind of got in trouble where I mentioned the production team. I was like, hey, Wes and Leo totally saved my butt, and I just want to thank the Newegg Ninjas behind the scenes for keeping this show looking good, because, you know, it's Trisha and I being goofballs and talking about like motherboards and stuff.
Right.
Like we wouldn't be able to do it without the 15 people it takes to make a live broadcast. And one of the producers came like, I don't know if we should be talking about like all the behind the scenes stuff, because what happens like when something goes wrong? And you're like, well, when something goes wrong, one of your Newegg ninjas will probably end up on camera trying to fix it. And that's way more jarring than if you're pretending that somehow Trisha and I, just through our own chutzpah, make a live broadcast each week. You need to acknowledge the fact that an army of people are making this content, And that became really important. So like it just like regardless is like every week now I'm just like, oh, and hey, thanks to the new Egg Ninja team for putting together this liquid cooled monster gaming rig, because I don't have time to build like a monster PC every week. And they build like 6 every week so that we can show off a water block or a graphics card or something like that.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the charm of YouTube in the early days was that it really was like a single person sitting in their bedroom or in their whatever,
like us right now.
Yeah, talking to a camera, and just like there was an honesty to it that was really transparent.
Oh, yeah. But now, that reflected in the fact that, I mean, we were talking about like webcam vlogging quality videos, and now it's like whenever I start seeing like really cinematic gimbal tracking, panning, dolly shots, I like in the way that it might be all cobbled together and edited and produced, and you're like, I doubt very much it's just one cool groovy dude who's putting out a video every day with this kind of production quality, but they never talk about that. They'll talk about like, oh, and I use this camera, and you're like, cool. And it's just you? Really?
I sort of felt like it all started to jump the shark when it was like $50,000. People are talking about like the Red cameras and how they're $50,000 in the chat. It's like, dude, $50,000 is like 1/4 of what my house is worth. You know, so it's like the scale of what the higher level, like 1 million+ subscriber guys are working with it's gone beyond the place where people can look at that and have some understanding.
And also to a degree, I mean, there's the part of me that does sort of talk about like the diminishing returns too. I think there's something really status driven. Again, I do like the work that a lot of these channels put out. But I feel like some of it starts to get in the way of the actual commentary on things like the product they're talking about, because they're so interested in producing this cinematic look. And I wonder, what about the cinematic look actually adds to the conversation about the actual product?
Right.
And you've got some channels out there. I mean, I can't remember her name, but she makes very plain videos, and she's been a tech commentator for like us, for like over a decade. And her videos are super plain, but she still gets like hundreds of thousands of views on them because people come to her for the commentary. Right. And it doesn't matter that she's just sort of shooting this in 720p on like a DSLR that's just on a tripod. Like, her audience respects her opinion on stuff. That's kind of the point that I try to drive at with, like, I don't care to do this real cinematic look, because every second I spend trying to pull off the most gorgeous tracking shot is a second that I'm not talking about the product, or not showing you something specifically related to what I'm talking about on the product. And that's where we all can have different styles and stuff. But again, like, why would I try to match them for that kind of production value when it literally takes time away from me actually using, experiencing, and sharing my thoughts on the product? And that's where I'm always just sort of confused by what is it that people are actually gravitating towards with those videos.
Yeah, I think for me, like, on one hand, I think I totally get it that those guys are geeks and they love camera gear. They love, you know, the stuff that they use, and they got to a place where they had the opportunity to up their game and get the crazy expensive stuff. Yeah. And they're just geeking out about it. But what gets lost, I think, on a certain level is like when I see Marquez covering the Tesla, this, that, the other thing, and it's like five videos in the span of 3 weeks about a car that no one who watches him is ever going to be able to afford.
Doesn't it just start to feel like a little lifestyles of the rich and famous, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's aspirational. I don't want to take that away from him, because that kid's got hustle. I mean, no one would ever fault his work ethic or the fact that he is interested in putting out a high quality product. But then it's also like, what conversation are we really having here, though? That's what I'm confused by. Lisa from Mobile Tech Review.
Oh, yeah.
is the woman I'm talking about. I love her videos. I actually genuinely enjoy her commentary on stuff, and she brings a very different perspective from the normal sort of tech YouTube dude bro kind of conversation around like laptops and desktops and stuff. And so, but again, like her videos are ultra plain. Like there's very little gilding that lily. It's like, here's the product. Oh, that's so refreshing. I actually wanted to look at the product you're talking about.
Yeah, there's like zero B-roll, zero. It's like,
here it is. You know, the space bar. I don't like the space bar, so I'll show you the space bar while I talk about not liking the space bar.
Yeah.
There's no depth of field chicanery happening here.
And all of her videos are like 20 minutes long.
Right. So, and actually getting into them. I mean, same thing like why I love like an Erica Griffin for the same reason. Like you need to do 2 hours in your review. All right. I'll follow you down this trail. And by the end of it, I'll be like, I didn't think that you would actually have 2 hours to say about this, but you've proven me wrong again, Ms. Griffin. You've proven me wrong again.
Yeah, and there are times like I know in some of her videos she'll do like the time stamping of it's like, okay, I only want to hear about the camera. So
I'm gonna 45 minutes in. Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Erica.
Yeah. And that's really like the balance is all the people who give you advice about YouTube will say like, oh, 10 minutes is where you
like 3 minutes. No, I got off another like YouTube conference call with my, what are they? I don't even know what they're pretending to be, like channel advocates. And I was like, oh, you can check out the Creator Studio. And you're like, that's not helpful at all. Oh, I see some of your videos are like over 5 minutes. Are you fucking kidding me? Seriously?
Yeah.
I want, who I want in my audience is someone who has the patience to make it through more than 2 minutes of discussion about something.
Yeah.
And I already mock the people in my comments who are like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And you didn't consider this. And you're like, yeah, at 3 minutes in, I talked exactly about what you just said I didn't talk about because you couldn't have been bothered to finish the video. So let's not play that game, because I'll pin your comment and I'll make fun of you for it.
Yeah, I typically just say you didn't watch the video.
Someone didn't watch. Oh, I totally watched it, but I still think that you could like no. Yeah. Your first point was addressed in the video because I made the video and I watched the whole video. And but I should probably be getting going here soon. I don't know. I mean, you wanted to try and maybe also do a little Q&A before I have to evaporate. If that's something that you think.
I mean, it's 1:45 in the morning here for me, so it's
right. I'm getting cranky that it's about to be midnight in my neck of the woods. You're getting even more beat up than I am.
It's it's okay. Maybe we can because I know once we open up Q&A, then it just starts to come, and I want to be able to give people as much as we could possibly give. So maybe we save Q&A for another time, because I think we've really kind of. Yeah, see, Ruben says it's 10:43. It's the same time.
2:43.
2:43. Yeah, it's 1:43 for me. So, but I think this has been awesome. I really do appreciate you coming on and doing this marathon session with me. My wife is going to be like, "Why didn't you go to sleep?" And I'm like, I was talking.
Reasons?
I was talking to Juan about all this tech stuff. And she's like that.
Oh, and we just got Demir Frank in the chat too. I love that dude's videos.
Man, yeah, Demir is a good guy. I really do enjoy his stuff too. Well, it'll be available to rewatch as many times as you want.
Don't rewatch it a bunch of times. Once will be enough.
Yeah,
I'm going to speak for Jason's channel here, and don't watch this a ton of times. How about that? If anybody makes it all the way through this after this recording, then I'll be really impressed. Like I'll be. How about that? Because the live chat won't make it to the comments. How about this? The first person I see on this video oh man, I want to do this because people who are watching it now will know the trick and they'll just wait for the video to be off. I was going to try and do something silly like like leave a comment with the word rutabaga in it. It's gonna be tricky. How do I?
Yeah. Well, they'd have to be able to spell rutabaga.
I don't think I can come up with. I'm too tired. I'm not even as tired as you should be, and I'm too tired to come up with a fun contest for your channel. I'm sorry, man.
That's totally fine. But maybe we can come back and do a straight up Q&A.
I'd like that.
Follow up.
Definitely.
So that way everybody
we'll do the part 2 of this podcast.
yeah, you know.
Right on. I'm game. I'm always game.
Yeah, it's been a totally great time, and for all somebody spelled it, Ruben. Thank you.
Nicely done.
Yeah, but thanks to everybody who stuck around through the chat. I've been watching the conversation going on. Really, some interesting stuff going on in there. And Juan, for you, I really do appreciate it. Like I said at the start of this whole thing, like I've been watching your videos for a really long time, and it's really great to be able to have long conversations about stuff with you. Because
it's kind of nice having that kind of human experience, and especially because I wasn't blowing smoke. I've really enjoyed the work that you've been putting out lately, and I think a part of this is a lot of us, not just the producers, the people who are consuming YouTube content. I think we're all kind of getting the sense that we're all in this together. It's not, there's no there's no real barrier between those of us who are actually putting ourselves on camera to talk about this stuff and the people who are joining us in the comments and joining us on social media to talk about this stuff.
Right.
We're all cut from the same cloth, and we're all going to be affected by the quality of content from these recent moves. We're all going to be affected by a world of $1,000 smartphones that don't quite do what we'd want them to do.
Yeah.
We literally are all hand in hand together on this. And so whatever we can do to kind of foster that sense of community, to be inclusive and to be proactive about addressing the concerns of our community, is only going to benefit everybody who's a fan of this stuff, of producing the content, consuming the content, and just geeks out about what this content speaks to. Yeah. And that's why I feel it's so important to talk about this stuff even more and to join this conversation at an even higher level.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it all comes down to the idea that, like, I have already had a couple of different careers in this general entertainment world. And I know I put every fiber of my being wanted to be a rock star. And I worked really hard at doing it, and I got close enough to see what it would be like, but it didn't happen. Not the way that I wanted it to. I made work that I'm really proud of, et cetera, et cetera. Same thing with writing. I've done work that I'm really proud of. I come to YouTube after having those two experiences. It's just like, I now understand that I've got nothing to lose and nothing to put airs on about. This is me.
Yeah.
Talking about whatever. And the fact that this community is here is what's always drawn me toward YouTube, because it's such a basic human thing in such a strangely, I don't know, not inhuman.
We have not evolved to handle this kind of social interaction beyond our little huts and villages. It is totally a head trip. Trying to rise to the occasion to make sure that we really are being the best selves that we can be.
Yeah. So with deep thoughts, maybe this is the place to shut it down. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. My name is Jason, sometimes known as DTL. This is Painfully Honest Tech. Tech so honest it hurts, and it really does hurt at like 10 to 2 in the morning. Juan, thanks again for being here, man. I really do appreciate it. This has been a really awesome chat, and
Absolutely, my pleasure, and I'm always down to do it again. We'll do a whole extra hour on like philosophy or like religion or politics. Something safe to talk about.
Oh yeah, I tell my students that I work with, when they're going out to look for jobs and stuff, I'm like, okay, 3 things that you should really stay away from: religion, politics, and sports.
Yep. I was just gonna say the sports one is probably even deserving to be higher up on that list.
Yeah, I made one video. I was a precinct captain in my district for Bernie Sanders, and
right on.
I made one video about why I was making that effort for Bernie, and it was before I really had a ton of people watching the channel anyway, and I didn't get as much negative as I thought I would, but I recognized also that, like, people aren't going to come on my channel to hear about my politics, because they're expecting me to talk about, phones or headphones.
It gets pretty heady. And then also it's just like, do I really want to go down that rabbit hole? Like, it's a nice place to visit, but I don't want to live there.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I think there's another level. There's always another level above where you are. And, oh man, see, look, I just mentioned Bernie Sanders and somebody unsubscribed.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Yeah.
Really speaking for your channel, no big loss, Jason. You got plenty more where that guy came.
Yeah.
I think we're punch drunk enough. I should definitely wrap this up, and I can't even imagine how you're still upright.
Well, it's the constitution of an ox.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very nicely done.
Anyway, so let that be a lesson to you people. Don't talk for nearly 3 hours at a time, or people will unsubscribe from you. So gonna cut the feed right now, and I'll see you guys again later on this week with more video goodness. Thank you again, Juan.
Thank you.
Yeah.